RCAF soon found wreckage and even recovered frigid waters where they soon succumbed to nature. So one might think that if they'd managed to recover recover all surviving crew of the B-36 by the 16th, then they could pivot back to the missing 44 folks on board the Skymaster and all the family members and servicemen and all this stuff. Right? Wrong! On February 16th, 1950, another plane would go down. This one was a Royal Canadian Air Force Douglas Dakota III, registered as 664. There were no fatalities in this crash, with the only injury being a sprained ankle, but still, resources from Operation Mike were being utilized to evacuate personnel on board the RCAF Dakota 664. Then the next day, on February 17th, 1950, the signal had been received to cut down on Operation Mike, with only a small force being left in place to chase down rumors and reports of this mysteriously missing plane. Some of the rumors and reports that they left a team in place to hunt down were incredibly far-fetched. Take, for example, a few weeks before, on February 2nd, 1950, an unsigned report intended for Air Force personnel told search and rescuers to search near Great Bear Lake at a river junction where some of the crew sheltered in the body of the plane, though provisions were running short. You see, on February 3rd, 1950, a French-Canadian prospector visited the HQ for the search. He claimed to have extra-sensitive powers and was receiving shockwaves from metal objects from the missing C-54, and pointed out a crash location near Watson Lake. on a map. And even those who spoke with the prospector thought it was far-fetched, but were convinced by his sincerity and devout charisma. A telegram from Mrs. Raymond Mangold of Norfolk, Arkansas, dated February 4th, 1950, instructs the Air Force search and rescue teams to search Dark Horse Canyon for the missing C-54, saying she saw it in a dream, but please look. On February 5th, someone who heard about the lady who dreamed about the crash location on the radio wrote a letter claiming that after a night of no sleep at 3 a.m., they received what they believed to be a telepathic message saying, "Look for the plane in bush near Revelstoke, British Columbia. Don't know how long food will last. Feet frozen." Reports and rumors were coming through basically daily, and these were the kinds of rumors and reports that a skeleton crew was left behind to investigate, and nothing was ever found. I mean, it's unbelievable. We compiled some of the divined locations where the crash could be located on a map to make it easy to visualize. Green represents Whitehorse, the capital of Yukon, where the search was based, and blue is a rough approximation of where those crash site reports claim to be. In all three flights we mentioned going missing, the C-54 Skymaster, B-36 Peacemaker, and the RCAF Douglas Dakota III were all military flights that went missing over the course of about 3 weeks in the same area, which is crazy. Yet another military contracted plane went missing on June 3rd, 1963, just a decade later. This time, a Douglas DC-7C carrying over 100 people, 95 passengers, and 6 crew members seemingly disappeared. It was called Flight 293, and it departed from McCord Air Force Base in Washington State and was headed to Elmendorf Air Force Base, the same AFB that the Skymaster had departed from before. Or vanishing. On board were military personnel, their dependents, DoD employees, and a Red Cross employee. And just over 2.5 hours into their flight, contact was lost with Flight 293, with no difficulties reported by the crew at any point before the loss of contact over the Gulf of Alaska. Answers would be both easy to find and and evasive, paradoxically. According to the aircraft accident report, the RCAF soon found wreckage and even recovered 1,500 pounds of it floating. However, when the gross weight at takeoff was recorded at over 123,000 pounds, including 23,000 pounds of jet fuel, that's just over 1% recovered if you remove the fuel weight. Not a single body was ever recovered from this crash. So how did this flight go down? The analysis of the crash and the accident report was unable to come to any probable reason it could have happened. Nothing indicated potential complications ahead of time. There was nothing glaring, nothing obvious. The aircraft was airworthy. The crew were qualified, certified, briefed, and prepared. Pre-flight activities were satisfactory in all regards. All required actions were performed, and the aircraft was properly equipped and fell within its normal limits of everything that should have been fine, and the flight began normally without an incident. It was speculated that whatever happened so quickly that there was no time to prepare for a water landing, as adult life vests were recovered still encased in their plastic containers. So that's fucking crazy. But aviation disappearances associated with the phenomenon of the Alaskan Triangle don't stop being crazy there. One disappearance that could have massive implications on modern conspiracy theories began in the Alaskan Triangle back in 1972. On the morning of October 16, 1972, House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and Alaska Congressman Nick Begich Sr. boarded a twin-engine Cessna 310 in Anchorage for what should have been a routine 3.5-hour flight to Juneau. This disappearance left behind a terrifying mystery riddled with contradictions, confessions of murder, and connections to the JFK assassination conspiracies that persist over 50 years later. So Thomas Hale Boggs Sr. wasn't just any congressman when he disappeared. He was the House Majority Leader and the leading contender to become Speaker of the House. Here's a visual for you visual learners to understand what exactly this means. Kind of an important guy, to be honest. Having served Louisiana's 2nd District for 14 non-consecutive terms since 1941, Boggs wielded enormous influence in shaping American policy. But it was his role on the Warren Commission's investigating JFK's assassination that would haunt him until his final flight. Boggs was the youngest member of the Warren Commission at only 49 years of age, compared to Earl Warren, its most senior member, who was 72. Boggs was appointed on November 29, 1963, just days after JFK's death. And the Warren Commission, if you don't know, to say the least, was highly controversial in the adoption and endorsement of the lone gunman theory, believing that Lee Harvey Oswald had fired all 3 shots, left many unhappy both then and especially now. The commission failed to explain various simple, fundamental circumstances of the assassination, but this video is not about that. Okay, guys, we won't get into that here, but supposedly, while Boggs had publicly signed the report in 1964, alleged private accounts revealed conflicting beliefs. His son, Thomas Hale Boggs Jr., later revealed that the FBI showed his father dossiers compared to discredit Warren Commission critics, including photographs of sexual activity and reports on alleged communist affiliations. So essentially, if you didn't like the lone gunman theory, then here's porn of you. Pretty much. Gay porn of you. According to reports on alleged communist affiliations. So essentially, if you didn't like the lone gunman theory, then here's porn of you. Pretty much. Gay porn of you. According to an aide, Boggs repeatedly returned to one conclusion. He said, "Who will light his eyes out to the commission? On Oswald, on Ruby, on their friends, the bullets, the gun, you name it. That man liquor had more to it now. Come on." I imagine he had an old country boy accent like that. But this experience culminated in Boggs' explosive April 5th, 1971 House floor speech, where he accused the FBI of violating the Bill of Rights, breaking the laws it was sworn to uphold, phone-tapping members of Congress, and he even demanded J. Edgar Hoover's resignation for his involvement in all this. This guy was kind of an American hero, TBH. He essentially called the FBI America's version of the Nazi Gestapo in Germany, saying that they adopted their tactics and the tactics of the Soviet Union. The next day, President Nixon told Gerald Ford that he could no longer take counsel from Boggs as a single member of Congress. Ford speculated that Boggs was on pills as well as alcohol, while Deputy Attorney General Richard Kleindienst attacked his drinking problem and emotional instability, and also called him a libtard, which was a weird thing to say back then. Even more troubling was an incident on July 23rd, 1970, when Boggs was run off the road in DC by an unknown driver in a Lincoln Continental, aka a land boat. Boggs took down the license plate number, but DC Metropolitan Police later claimed they could not locate any relevant records of the incident. Strange. So all that is extremely suspicious. Now on to Nick Begich Sr., just 40 years old and the other missing man aboard the Cessna that we're talking about currently right now. This fellow represented Alaska's future, as divisive as it may have been. As the state's sole U.S. representative, he had been instrumental in passing the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act in 1971, which settled native land claims and enabled construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which I don't know if that's epic or bad. I didn't research it as much as I should have, I'm sure. The son of Croatian immigrants, Begich was running for re-election against Republican Don Young in what was expected to be a tight race. Ironically, he would be posthumously elected only to have Young win a special election on March 1973 and hold the seat for the next 50 fucking years. Which partisan side wants term limits? Which partisan side thinks that holding a seat for 50 years is insane? 50? The timing of the October 16, 1972 flight disappearance has some layers of dark irony. Allegedly, just 2 days earlier, pilot Robert Thomas reported that this airplane had a malfunctioning de-icing system, in which he claimed it was sometimes working, sometimes not working. Now, either this critical safety information never reached the pilot of the aircraft, Don Johns, or he chose to ignore that shit. You see, Don Johns had published an article in Flying Magazine titled "Ice Without Fear," showcasing his confidence in handling some ice without fear. In IWF, Johns says that icing inspires the crazies and a lot of airmen, but in his opinion, most of it is crock. With over 17,000 flight hours, Johns was no amateur, but he had a reputation for being somewhat anti-authority and potentially overconfident, given his death in an airplane, probably from icing. Plus, he had experienced 2 prior forced landings, including one just 8 months earlier due to oil pressure loss and extreme cold. And at 6:56 a.m., Johns called for a weather briefing that should have canceled the flight. Portage Pass was forecast closed with moderate rime icing predicted from 6,000 to 15,000 feet, and 20 minutes before their departure, a U.S. Air Force helicopter attempting the same route reported moderate to severe turbulence at 500 feet and headwinds of 55 knots and broke into overcast clouds at 200, 300 feet above. This pilot abandoned his flight through Portage Pass, which was the same pass Johns was to take Boggs and Begich through. Despite these warnings, the N1812H departed Anchorage at 8:59 a.m. with 4 souls aboard: Johns, Boggs, Begich, and Russell Brown, which was Begich's 37-year-old aide. And at 9:09 a.m., Johns made his last radio contact, filing an airborne flight plan and confirming affirmative when asked about emergency gear. This was a lie. The plane carried no emergency locator transmitter, despite Alaska law requiring them as of September 6, 1972, just 5 weeks earlier. And the required survival gear, food, axe, firearm, fishing gear, snowshoes, and sleeping bags were also completely absent. This guy didn't plan on crashing, let's be real. And 10 minutes after that final transmission, the aircraft would have been entering Portage Pass, where they were never heard from again. Residents of Whittier, just south of Portage Pass, reported hearing a small plane around the time the N1812H would have been overhead. And what followed was a very important search and rescue operation because of the people who were on board, 2 congressmen. This operation lasted 39 days and covered 325,000 square miles, an area larger than South Carolina. There were over 140 aircraft, including an SR-71 Blackbird spy plane personally ordered by Nixon, dozens of Coast Guard vessels, and hundreds of ground personnel. They flew over 1,000 missions, totaling 3,600 hours of flight, and found nothing. But the search did accidentally locate a plane that had been missing for 17 years, but found no trace of the one they were actually looking for. What's disturbing is that they reported anomalies immediately. Multiple emergency beacon signals were detected, one for 40 minutes near Juneau the day after the disappearance, and another 150 miles northeast of Anchorage in the entirely wrong direction. Yet, the plane supposedly carried no ELT, which was transmitting these signals. Ham radio operators in Northern California reported hearing transmissions from survivors in the hours following the disappearance, which the Air Force dismissed as hoaxes, despite the operators' insistence that they had heard genuine distress calls. And an anonymous tipster contacted the Coast Guard claiming to know the exact location of the crash using experimental electronic equipment. Now that guy sounds full of shit, but the FBI found this source reliable, with an agent noting he appeared rational, extremely intelligent, but somewhat strange. And he looked a little something like this. That was a joke. That was a big bada bing, bada boom joke. That was Dr. Parkenstein. TikTok, who was not alive in 1972. But if he was, he would have been rational, extremely intelligent, and somewhat strange. TBH. How long is this video? On November 24th, 1972, the day after Thanksgiving, the search was officially called off as efforts were redirected to hunt for a twin-engine plane that disappeared while flying the same route carrying 2 Californians. The official NTSB report claimed the plane lacked de-icing equipment, which supports the theory that icing caused the crash, which that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know shit about flying little tiny dumb airplanes, but, you know. Also, the whole Warren Commission thing, it seems like maybe they, those guys were better off dead for the incumbent government.
But they searched for them so much. They searched all over for them and stuff.
The icing remained the accepted explanation for this disappearance for decades until investigative journalist John Walczak, which I don't know how to say that word, John Walczak reported in 2020 that N181 12H actually for decades until investigative journalist John Walczak, which I don't know how to say that word, John Walczak reported in 2020 that N1812H actually had both de-icing and anti-icing equipment installed. And this revelation, if true, demolishes the weather-related crash theory. Also, if it had been the result of a gradual buildup of icing, wouldn't there have been time to radio that there was trouble potentially, or was John's just extremely confident? I'm not sure. Now, this is where things take a massive turn for the conspiracy and get really freaky. On November 8th, 1994, in Pima County Jail in Tucson, Arizona, convicted murderer Jerry Max Pasley made a stunning confession to 3 investigators. He claimed that in the summer of 1972, he had delivered a locked briefcase containing a bomb to Alaska on behalf of the Bonanno crime family. That's right, the Bonannos. The briefcase was handed to 2 men in Anchorage, and years later he was told it had been used to destroy a congressman's plane. Pasley wasn't just any criminal. He was deeply embedded in organized crime, having followed the Licavoli family from Detroit to Tucson in the 1960s, and he was linked to bombings in the late 60s, though he was imprisoned for gunning a man down in a hotel. The most shocking detail of all this is Pasley married Peggy Begich, Nick's widow, in March of 1974, just 17 months after her husband's disappearance. What? What the dude? According to Pasley, Peggy had met secretly with mob boss Joe Bonanno at Tucson's Kon-Tiki restaurant before her husband's disappearance. Despite Pasley agreeing to take a polygraph test, the FBI immediately shut down the investigation because they're the f***ing Gestapo. So the potential link between the loss of flight N1812H and organized crime and the organized crime connection to the JFK assassination raises some very serious red flags. Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK and Jack Ruby killed Oswald on live TV. Jack Ruby was a nightclub owner. What business did he have killing a presidential assassin? He's a really angry guy. I love America! America! I killed an assassin! I'm just waiting for that same thing to happen now. Now, rumors of Jack Ruby's organized crime association were dismissed by the Warren Commission, having no evidence of a conspiracy after investigating Jack Ruby and his alleged illegal activities with members of the organized underworld. I don't know. Seems like a bunch of damn bullshit to me. Now, remember, Boggs completely disappeared and is now rumored to have organized crime connections through Pasley and Peggy and all this shit. But if we go back to the JFK assassination, Boggs signed the Warren Commission, seemingly endorsing its findings, but there were allegations of pressure, blackmail of Warren Commission critics and Boggs.
Grind's going well, my friend. We're kind of in the final throes of it, thankfully. So basically, I've just got a little bit of herb lore to do, and then I'll make some Elder Overload salves, and then we're gonna go do 2 Reapers back to back and get our fucking essence of finality. So, really excited.
Boggs later stated, Hoover lied his
How are
eyes
things
out
going
to
for
the
you,
commission,
my friend?
on Oswald, on Ruby, on their friends, the bullets. the gun, you name it. If you look at it like this, it seems very, very, very fishy. What really happened? I have no idea. Was it a bomb? Did the Alaska Triangle's magnetic distortions drive them off course and they were consumed by a Kushtaka? I have no idea. The Triangle's history of swallowing aircraft whole defies explanation, and people go missing at an alarming rate in this area. The current rate of 2,250 missing persons per year is more than double the national average. 4 out of every 1,000 Alaskans go missing. This is compared to 6.5 per 100,000 nationally for the United States of America. The USGS College Magnetic Observatory uses instruments 1,000 times more sensitive than handheld compasses and regularly records significant magnetic disturbances in this area. And the magnetic North Pole's migration compounds navigation problems as well, as it moves 15 to 25 kilometers northwest annually and sometimes shifts up to 50 miles in a single day due to solar wind effects. It feels wrong to write off such potentially impactful disappearances as just part of the mystery of the unexplained triangle, because it also belittles the lost souls on board other flights who went down in the region. But luckily, modern technology makes finding planes more feasible. GPS-guided deepwater sonar, drones, LiDAR mapping technology, ground-penetrating radar, advanced satellite imagery, all of these things could be utilized to search these areas and identify missing wreckages systematically. Climate change is also contributing. Melting glaciers are exposing previously buried aircraft, as demonstrated by the 2020 discovery of a military plane that was missing since 1952. Somewhere in the 75 miles of water between Whittier and Hinchinbrook Island, the N1812H likely rests intact, holding potentially some answers to whether October 16th, 1972 marked a tragic accident or the successful execution of one of American history's most audacious political assassinations. The technology exists now, and I hope we find it. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, press the like button.
Yeah, I'm gonna eventually grind for that 60k dragon trophy, but like, it does feel a bit grindy to just do right away. I definitely want to just have some fun first, which is why I'm doing my particular PPM grinds. But we've still got ages to grind for that, you know? So I'm not really, I ain't rushing shit.
My Oompa TV channel, and some parts are available on the Too Late Show. So yeah, go watch that stuff. Go to sour.gg, buy some sour candy, the owner of the candy company, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
No, that's understandable. Busting sucks. Busting really sucks ass. What imp is that? What? What imp are you talking about?
In 2012, a man by the name of Aaron Swartz was threatened with 50 years in prison for downloading academic articles that he was legally allowed to read. And recently, a trillion-dollar company by the name of Meta pirated, stole millions of books and fed them to its AI, with the CEO approving it, and that trillion-dollar corporation never faced a single criminal charge. This is yet another story of the two-tiered system in America where some people can just do whatever they want and others cannot. If you don't know the story of Aaron Swartz, this will be a very interesting and eye-opening video for you that might make you think a little bit, okay? We tried to do our best to research this as effectively as possible, but there is a lot, and we're all idiots. Aaron Hillel Swartz was a technological prodigy whose vision of informational freedom would ultimately place him in the crosshairs of federal prosecutors. Aaron was a real living genius, and by the age of 14, he had co-authored the RSS. He co-authored the 1.0 specification that revolutionized web syndication and allowed things like podcasts to blow up and become easy to watch. Before the RSS feed, you had to check individual sites for posts to see if there was anything new, like walking into every store each day to see if there's fresh stock or what's available. But with the RSS, it's like all the stores agreed to send you a standardized daily delivery box that always lists exactly what's new, but in the same format. So it's a delivery sorter, if you will. An RSS reader, you can put it all neatly on your shelf. It's incredible. It's a revolutionary thing that most people don't even think about because it's just It's incredible. It's a revolutionary thing that most people don't even think about because it's just such a part of what we do now. And Aaron, at 14 years old, co-authored this.
Oh, that's what she meant by impling. I was wondering what the fuck that
also expanding
propeller hat noise was.
Information like author names, metadata, categories, or whatever else they wanted without breaking the system. This is all pretty early internet history, by the way, and Aaron wanted the internet not to just be a cool new thing that required geniuses to use, but rather an amazing new thing where the world was within reach for everyone.
You know, at your fingertips, you wouldn't have to talk to anybody. It would just be instantly available. And I remember, you know, I couldn't wait until the whole world was on the internet and I never had to call anybody again.
Aaron specifically could recall the moment the internet went from a niche thing to a widely propagated tool. Websites, something so familiar now, used to be nearly non-existent. Everything was just local.
I think the moment where I realized the internet really had taken off was when I started seeing URLs and advertisements. And you would see it on huge billboards, right? And on the sides of buses, you'd see it everywhere. And suddenly, this thing that was this kind of obscure, geeky thing that just you and your friends knew, that was just part of the culture.
It's crazy to think about that now with all of the online privileges that we have, all of the information we have available. And we're still all stupid. Anyways, back to Aaron. By the age of 19, Aaron had helped build Reddit after merging his startup Infogami through Y Combinator's first program, rewriting Reddit's entire code base from Lisp to Python. He's the original Redditor, and his collaboration with John Gruber produced Markdown, which is the lightweight markup language now used by GitHub, Discord, and countless other platforms. In fact, my note-taking, where all of these things are written and stored, is on Obsidian, which is a Markdown note taker. Schwartz's genius extended beyond code. He saw technology as a tool for democratizing knowledge and challenging concentrated power. Schwartz helped develop the Internet Archive's open library, making a free book database that anyone could use, and he was also an early architect for Creative Commons, a nonprofit dedicated to the open sharing of knowledge and culture. The guy was truly a visionary and pioneer in the early internet, and all of these things most of us use and just completely take for granted once again, but he helped create them. In my opinion, Aaron could have ridden the merits of his skill to the very top if he wanted to, even outshining the most notable people in digital innovation today. For example, that guy with the broccoli head, Mark Wahlberg. That's not Mark Wahlberg, that's Mark Zuckerberg. But instead of being seduced by wealth and ambition, he was pulled into a very different direction. Even as Silicon Valley courted him with the seduction of wealth, with Reddit's sale to Condé Nast for $10 million, which absolutely had to have been insanely tempting at age 20, Schwartz felt called to activism. Aaron left Reddit in 2007 after being asked to leave by his boss because he was unable to stomach corporate culture, and decided to turn his talents towards liberating information. Aaron's 2008 Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto crystallized his very unique philosophy. Information is power, but like all power, some want to keep it for themselves. This is before everything was just available on the internet. It seems so different. Like, you can just look stuff up now. You can ask an AI if you're a secondhand thinker. I'm not sure. This is all before that, before the epicness that is the internet. I digress. As technology progressed, so did the control of information. In an interview, Schwartz outlined this very well. Old broadcasting was limited by space in the airwaves, starting with 10 channels and eventually growing with cable to 500 channels, but someone still controlled what went on all of these channels.
And so what you see now is not a question of who gets access to the airwaves. It's a question of who gets control over the ways you find people. You know, you start seeing power centralizing in sites like Google, these sort of gatekeepers that tell you where on the internet you want to go. The people who provide you your sources of news and information.
And Aaron's goal with quotes like these seemed to be to limit the power of that gatekeeper as much as possible, because it's the first time in history that information can be freely available to someone who just has access to a public library. Walk into a library, get on a computer, look something up. You can find out who's evil. You can find out who assassinated who. You can find out who's on certain lists, not because you're in the know, but just because you have access to the internet. So to overcome the roadblocks that corporations and different institutions created to ensure that gatekeeping and therefore ensure profitability, Aaron wanted everyone to pitch in and do their part to make all available information publicly available. His manifesto called for civil disobedience against the privatization of knowledge, declaring it a moral imperative to download scientific journals and upload them to file-sharing networks, which now you can just go to PubMed and find most anything. You can just find information. So this seems so alien that this is a war that he's involved in fighting, but students, librarians, and scientists were called on to use their positions of privilege to bring the banquet of knowledge to the rest of the world, which was locked out of it at that time. And Aaron wouldn't just call upon others to liberate the information hidden from the public. He would lead the charge personally, like Mel Gibson in the final battle of the Patriot. But in a new age, digital age, where instead of a nation an ocean away subjugating the revolutionaries, now corporations, institutions, and the government sought to centralize information essential to the evolution of human thinking and innovation. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but here's an example to help you and me understand. Works can be copyright protected for varying amounts of time depending on the number of authors, or if it was work for hire, or if it was published anonymously or under a pseudonym. Single authors' works are copyright protected for 70 years after the author's death, and multiple author works are for 70 years after the death of the last surviving author, and hired works are protected for 95 years after publication or 120 years from creation, whichever comes first. Anonymous, pseudonym works are also 95 to 120 years from publication creation protected through copyright. Once that copyright protection period ends, the work becomes public domain and anyone can use it freely without worry of retribution or litigation or consequence. That's why we're now seeing Winnie the Pooh horror movies, with A.A. Milne's characters entering the public domain in 2021 after the copyright expired on the original 1926 books. Boom. Now, to be clear, the public domain isn't always respected when there is money to be made. Obviously, the philosophical transactions of the Royal Society continued to gatekeep content from 1665 behind a subscription paywall database when it should have been completely free to access by anybody wishing to view it, because it's 300 years old. You and nobody you know had anything to do with creating that information. And it's important to learn the past, and it's important to read things from it. There's a common colloquialism that I'm sure all of you have heard before from a guy by the name of George Santayana, which is, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. I thought that was from Spider-Man, but it turns out it was Batman. So here we have foundational information, hundreds of years of human history and documentation that is inaccessible unless you shelled out $19 an article for one person to view it on one computer for 1 month before access was withdrawn. That sounds like bullshit. And that's what Aaron Swartz and the open access movement were trying to completely dismantle. Now, this obviously wouldn't be an Oompaville video if there wasn't government involvement and conspiracy. Unknown to Swartz, federal surveillance had begun years before his arrest. The FBI flagged his email domain aaronsw.com during an Al-Qaeda counterterrorism investigation at the University of Pittsburgh. They assigned it case number 315THQ-C1475879 with the prefix 315 indicating international terrorism classification. He specifically was never the target of this Al-Qaeda investigation, but it put Aaron on the FBI's radar, and he wouldn't be leaving the radar of the FBI anytime soon. Soon, he would be the target of his own FBI investigation. I want you to think in your mind, what do you think this guy did to become the target of the FBI? Well, what did he do to become the target of the FBI? He downloaded information that was locked behind paywalls, more specifically, court documents. This is information that is publicly available. It is information that is digitized and, once again, publicly available. That's how court documents work. Just the way that he accessed it was wrong. Aaron had teamed up with Carl Malamud, the president and founder of public.resource.org, when he was 21 years old to help the nonprofit in its efforts to end the government's financial exploitation of public access to court electronic records, the PACER system. These are court documents, information that isn't protected at all by copyright because no one's making it. It's just important information for transparency in the justice system. What? Yet they were generating roughly $150 million a year from its fees of 10 cents per page for document viewing and 10 cents per page for search results when you look up a case. It's unbelievable. And the revenue Pacer generated grew year after year, reaching $1.2 billion by 2016. And Aaron did the absolute unthinkable. He developed an automation script that downloaded millions of pages from Pacer. And between September 4th and September 22nd, 2008, he used 2 accounts to make requests every 3 seconds, and over those 18 days, downloaded 8 million pages from Pacer, which the FBI approximated to be worth $1.5 million of publicly available court documents. So that's 20% of the federal court database that he downloaded, and obviously, the government wasn't going to let that slide. So the FBI began searching for him and physically surveilling his home. And on February 4th, 2009, a synopsis of a field report reads as follows. Attempted to locate Aaron Swartz, his vehicles, driver's license, information, and picture, and others at 349 Marshman Avenue, Highland Park, Illinois, 60035. Successfully located driver's license photo for Swartz. Drove by address in an attempt to locate Swartz or vehicles related to the residence, but was unsuccessful. House is set on a deep lot behind other houses on Marshman Avenue. This is a heavily wooded, dead-end street with no other cars parked on the road, making continued surveillance difficult to conduct without severely increasing the risk of discovery. So, the big question is, did Swartz do anything actually illegal by downloading publicly available copyright-free information that should be available to everyone? The details provided on the First page of the FBI's documentation on the Swartz case stemming from this incident suggests that an argument could be made that it wasn't, or at most falls in a gray area. You see, U.S. courts had implemented a pilot program at 17 depository libraries, allowing users to access Pacer systems for free, but from computers at these libraries. So Aaron used login information obtained from 2 libraries in this pilot program to access Pacer for free, but from outside the library, which they realized from tracking Aaron's IP. He just wasn't in the right spot, which does that make it illegal or reasonable to be surveilled by the FBI? I'm not exactly sure. So perhaps that's why no formal charges were filed regarding this incident specifically, although surveillance would continue. Of course. Why, dude? Anyways, Aaron was just getting started, and soon he would undertake the monumental task of liberating the vast digital archives of journal storage, aka JSTOR. And this, unfortunately, would mark the beginning of the end for Aaron. The journal storage incident began on September 24th, 2010, when Swartz registered a laptop on MIT's network as Gary Host using a fake email address, and over the next 4 months, he would download 4.8 million academic articles from the JSTOR database, or 80% of Journal Storage's total library. His Python script, keepgrabbing.py, bypassed JSTOR's terms of service with a simple flag, except TC equals true. And when Journal Storage kind of caught on and blocked his IP address after he downloaded 450,000 articles in 11 hours, he switched to a new address and continued the downloads. On October 9th, 2010, during Columbus Day weekend, using a modified MAC address, he continued to download Journal Storage articles, but it started to bring down Journal Storage servers, nearly bringing down service worldwide. And Journal Storage is very important at this time. And as a result of this, JSTOR blocked MIT's entire network, causing a 3-day campus-wide outage from October 9th to October 12th. But Aaron continued downloading undeterred, using new IP addresses to circumvent blocks and slowing the rate of downloads to avoid detection from monitoring systems, though he couldn't evade capture forever. To make this fully make sense, we have to detail the scale and influence of JSTOR, or Journal Storage. I'm going to paint them as a little bit villainous here to create a sort of bad guy for Aaron to be the vigilante hero going in after them, because that's kind of the reality. For context, JSTOR is a massive nonprofit digital library holding thousands of journals. This is not like people's personal journals, but rather scientific journals. It's millions of articles and other primary sources and books. It serves over 11,000 institutions, schools, and universities globally. It's where you get legit information that has been compiled by legit people. Titles for JSTOR come from over 1,200 publishers in 57 countries, making it a modern-day equivalent to the Library of Alexandria. And to access this database, you have to pay, and the pricing becomes very convoluted depending on whether or not you are a corporate, for-profit, or non-profit/government entity, and how many collections you want access to as well. Small nonprofits could look at annual fees from $1,200 a year to $18,000 a year. Medium-sized universities could pay between $50,000 and $83,000 a year. And corporate for-profit organizations range from $9,000 to $65,000 and up per year, depending on how many journals you regularly use. And individuals could access the journal storage outside of being a part of a school, corporation, or institution, but if you wanted to download from the database, it costs you $19.50 a month, and you can download 10 PDFs for that $19. And over a year for $200, you could download 120 PDFs. So it's like a little bit of a discount. In newsflash, that's the current pricing. It used to be much worse, and barriers used to be far more inaccessible. For example, Al Jazeera reported an opinion piece on pricing to access academic articles, which used to cost on average $19 an article. And in 2019, JSTOR and ARTSTOR, then separate entities that later became integrated, contributed $89.1 million in program service revenue to its parent company, Ithaca Harbor's nearly $104 million of total revenue, according to pages 9 and 12 of its Form 990 tax filings from that year. Pretty lucrative nonprofit organization. But of course, that money goes towards salaries for staff, licensing of their journals and articles and infrastructure, and their expansion of their library. But I don't know if it costs $79 million to do all that, all right? I don't know if it costs that. Maybe let me do it. I'll do it for less. So yeah, and an attempt to break down where JSTOR's money goes alleges that from their findings, 30% goes to publishers for the rights to license their articles and journals and works, etc. 70% goes to overhead, which 10% of that is for running servers, 40% of that is salaries, and 20% to admin costs. We attempted to verify these numbers for the 2019 filing, but the findings are unlikely to be fully accurate, as JSTOR is the biggest earner and entity within Ithaca, but not the full entity because of ARTSTOR as well. I'm sorry. JSTOR made $79.1 million and ARTSTOR made $9.9 million. So journal storage made up 85% of Ithaca Harbor's total revenue for that year. And page 10 of Ithaca Harbor's 2019 Form 990 shows that they claimed $19 million went to fees and publisher payments, which is 21% of the total earnings from JSTOR and ARTSTOR. Page 10 also shows that salaries made up $32.1 million of Ithaca Harbor's expenses, and compensation to officers, directors, trustees, and key employees that make up another $5.4 million, for a total of $37.5 million in cost for salaries. They reported 428 employees for the year as well, and on page 5 they show the average salary at $75,000 a year. But Kevin Guthrie, president and trustee of Ithaca Harbor, earned $557,000 that year alone, and according to the organization's filings between 2013 and 2023, he's been compensated a total of $5.8 million. And he's also seen significant raises year after year, growing from $398,000 in 2013 $622,000 in 2023, and that's without even factoring in the filing's other compensation, which is another $62,000 in 2023. So it's kind of crazy. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. Obviously, businesses got to be run, you know, nonprofits. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on with this kind of thing. And it's especially weird that the nonprofit is paying employees nearly double the amount that it costs for them to license the scientific journals and articles and primary sources that they hide behind a paywall. It seems odd to me, considering they're literally just paying for work and just putting it on a website, which is what Wikipedia does for free, I think. But obviously Wikipedia is cringe. So I don't know, maybe it's just Netflix or HBO Max for nerds and dweebs and libtards who want to read scholarly records. I have no idea. One thing I do know is that streaming services like HBO and Netflix are just platforms for movies and shows that are not funded by taxpayers. That's some of the biggest criticism for JSTOR, is that government entities pay for these things using our money. And not only that, but a lot of the research is funded and granted by the taxpayers as well. The research that is then being doubly paywalled. So journal storage has a healthy revenue stream, specifically that stems from charging rates that block public access to research that is funded by taxpayer dollars, and then that knowledge is then privatized and funded by public grants, which is taxpayer funding. It's pretty complicated and really unfortunate that that's a thing. Now, to be very clear, tax records and revenue aside, JSTOR are now big proponents of open access post Aaron Swartz era, okay, guys? They are the boogeyman at this point in time that we're talking about, 2008, 2010, 2011, 2013. That's them at this point, while Aaron is sucking them dry on the MIT campus. So once again, they're big proponents of open access now, and they have massively changed their tone over the years, and that is completely commendable and very respectable. It's just trying to be as transparent as possible for this video. And on January 4th, 2011, network engineers were able to trace the exact location of the IP address that was downloading from the servers. This location was in a basement closet of MIT campus building 16, where the network switches were located, from which a cable ran under a cardboard box. Then under that hid a laptop computer and an external hard drive. So police were notified immediately, and they even attempted to copy the hard drive but were unsuccessful, and instead they took fingerprints from the laptop and left it in the exact same spot and returned the room to the way that it had been before they interfered. Their goal was to wait for whoever installed it to come back and catch them basically doing it, or surveil them further. So they returned the room to its original state and set up a camera to film whoever returned for the laptop. And on January 6th, 2011, Aaron Swartz returned to the basement closet to retrieve the laptop and was caught on video spending over 10 minutes in the room. And after disconnecting the laptop, a monitoring script sent an email to one of the campus engineers who, although not on campus at the time, was unable to reach anyone in time to apprehend Aaron while he was in building number 16. Aaron would soon reconnect to the network from building 4 and then the Stratton Student Center, and an hour and a half after he initially disconnected from the network, causing the monitoring script to see the email that Aaron was on campus, campus police identified him on his bicycle. After following Aaron briefly to give backup time to respond, an MIT campus police officer confronted Aaron, who would then abandon his bicycle and flee on foot, saying that MIT police weren't real cops, which is hilarious. He outpaced the officer and eventually must have believed that he'd evaded because he slowed back down to a walk, but the officer had maintained visual contact. Then backup showed up and 2 officers closed in on him, and they apprehended him, handcuffed him, and found the laptop as well as the hard drive in his backpack. Then immediately after his capture, the response from the federal government was swift and severe. He was indicted by federal prosecutors facing 4 different felony charges. 1. Unlawfully obtaining information from a protected computer, recklessly damaging a protected computer, wire fraud, and computer fraud. But the thing was, neither MIT nor JSTOR would pursue any civil penalties against Aaron Swartz. So that's very important. These institutions that he was stealing from didn't want to pursue any penalties. They didn't want to press anything against him, which is so confusing to me. Journal Storage wasn't interested in any legal process and even made a public statement saying that once the content was secure, they were completely satisfied. And they were very sure to specify that the government decided to prosecute Aaron Swartz and not them. On the 14th of September 2011, Aaron's father, Robert, met with MIT's chancellor and was told that MIT's position was neutral. And roughly a year later, on September 28th, 2012, Aaron's attorneys asked MIT to meet with the U.S. Attorney's Office in support of Aaron. And on October 26, 2012, they told Aaron's attorneys that they were willing to accompany the defense and even share that they admired Aaron's work and that losing it would be a great loss. But through a shift in Aaron's defense team in November, his new attorney ceased that collaboration entirely. So after learning all of this, it makes it seem like the 2 leading institutions that were actually affected by Aaron's actions were maybe not on his side, but they certainly weren't his enemies. And an important factoid, Aaron wasn't actually a student at MIT, which is why they were taking a neutral stand. MIT even shared that if Aaron had been a student, they would have gotten more involved and potentially even lobbied against prosecution, as it would have been an internal matter for their discipline committee to handle instead of the federal government, which I don't understand why he was targeted by the federal government anyway. It doesn't make any sense. And then, the whole point of this is to show the example of the, big meta and broccoli head, Mark Wahlberg, or whatever the fuck his name is. In spite of the chirping from MIT, U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz was undeterred and wholly committed to seeing Aaron serve time, saying, "Stealing is stealing, whether you use a computer command or a crowbar, whether you take documents, data, or dollars. It is equally harmful to the victim whether you sell what you have stolen or give it away," which the victim in this case is researchers that have been paid through federal grants by tax dollars. Like, I don't there's not really that many victims in this crime, to be honest. Also, Journal Storage was completely content with getting its content back, and MIT wasn't pursuing legal consequences for Aaron and didn't consider themselves a victim and ultimately didn't want a trial to ensue because it would have been a waste of time and resources. So the victims, he was trespassing at MIT and stealing from Journal Storage. Both of the institutions didn't give a fuck. In spite of all this, Aaron was still being threatened with up to 35 years in prison at the time for the 4 charges, as well as $1 million in fines for theft of digital documents. But even calling it theft is an absolute stretch. MIT allowed users to create guest accounts that could access journal storage through their institutional subscription to the database, which is what Aaron did, just with a fake name and email. So he did something legal adjacent that we could just do. You could just do if you were on. It's weird. It's like putting someone in jail for taking too many books from the library and then reading them to children for bedtime for free too much. Also undeterred was Aaron. Aaron's activism and demands for open access to hidden and restricted information weren't finished just because of some pesky federal charges. On January 18th, 2012, Aaron's organization, Demand Progress, spearheaded an online protest that would affect the entire internet landscape in a peaceful protest against restricted access to knowledge. During this protest, the internet went completely dark. Over 115,000 websites participated in, up until that point, the most significant internet protest in history to defeat the Stop Online Privacy Act and the Protect Intellectual Property Act in a coordinated blackout, which Wikipedia, Reddit, and even Google joined. You guys might remember this. Google covered its logo with a large black rectangle. Reddit changed its splash page for 12 hours to Reddit is down, and Wikipedia had the words, "Imagine a world without free knowledge." Wikipedia also included a zip code search to find contact information for your local representatives. Millions answered the call in protest, and as a result of Aaron's movement, for their own representatives to represent them, do what they are elected to do, represent. 4 million emails were sent, 10 million signatures were collected, and 8 million phone calls were made, and also 3 million tweets were shared, which is crazy because Twitter was only a year old. The acts that were being protested against, the SOPA and PIPA, would have given ISPs free rein to block access to websites if they had credible evidence that they contained copyrighted material. So websites containing information to circumvent those blocks would be targeted even if just one link was posted. And anyone found guilty of this could face up to 5 years in jail. How unbelievable is that? And lo and behold, these were the people that supported those bills. Movie studios, music publishers, TV networks, people with money. Lots of big money people in there, which just having money doesn't mean you're a bad person, but thinking this is the right way does. Objectively, they were opposed by basically everybody else, which is why on January 23rd, 2012, the PIPA's motion to proceed was unanimously withdrawn, and there has been no action on SOPA since December 16th, 2011. So both fell completely flat as a result of this protest. This accomplishment was so impactful that at the Freedom to Connect conference held on May 21st and 22nd, 2012 in DC, Aaron Swartz gave a keynote speech called How We Stopped SOPA. While Aaron was being celebrated by the world at large for his efforts to make more information publicly available for free, if not all information, and actually doing something about it rather than just being some kind of spokesperson, the U.S. Attorney's Office of the United States Justice Department still saw Aaron as a criminal to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And 4 months after his keynote speech in September 2012, the United States of America versus Aaron Swartz case escalated with the introduction of a superseding indictment, which increased the number of felony charges against Aaron from 4 to 13. Counts 1 and 2 were for wire fraud, with Aaron allegedly defrauding journal storage of content they had invested in, collecting and digitizing, as well as defrauding MIT for deceptively making it appear as though he was affiliated with them by using their network to then access journal storage. Counts 3 to 7 were for computer fraud because Aaron accessed protected MIT and journal storage computers without authorization, and counts 8 through 12 were for unlawfully obtaining information from a protected computer. So it's essentially the same as counts 3 to 7, but they specify that the information gained through the unlawful access had a value exceeding $5,000. Count 13 was for recklessly damaging a protected computer, and this is due to an incident where his access to journal storage caused servers to go down, and in response, journal storage decided MIT's journal storage access should be revoked for several days. It's clear they were trying to prosecute to the fullest extent, and the timing of all this was not coincidental. Prosecutors used his 2008 Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto as proof of malicious intent in a briefing with congressional staffers with the House Oversight Committee, despite no proof that he ever intended to distribute the downloaded articles. On to the prosecution's approach. In my opinion, it is a pattern of intimidation and overreach that is nothing but disturbing. Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Heyman, son of former Deputy Attorney General Philip Heyman, led the charge with a level of zeal that is completely uncalled for. Supposedly, he was the uncompromising voice in the office of Ortiz, who we talked about earlier for being quoted as saying this. Aaron's lawyers told the prosecutors that he was suicidal, and their response was completely cold and self-serving. They said, put him in jail. He'll be safe there. There's zero empathy, zero remorse, zero sense. Really doesn't seem like that much of an account for justice, given the fact that the victims, which are supposed to be upheld through justice, were completely fine with what had happened. It didn't seem like they were doing this for anyone other than themselves. It was entirely self-serving and completely indicative of a prominent issue today. Government entities are forgetting that they serve the public, and they use their power and influence to make things better for themselves and or the adjacent institutions that they help represent as well, which they shouldn't represent institutions. They shouldn't represent BlackRock or Blackstone or McDonald's or whoever they should represent who they steal money from and then misappropriate to Israel. They should give me more money to clean my airsoft guns. Looking back at the prosecution now, it is so clear they were entirely out of touch, and comments made by Stephen Heyman would highlight that the continued efforts to prosecute Swartz were fueled by hate and a desperation to save face and just prosecute blindly. Heyman wanted MIT to cooperate with the prosecution's side of the legal battle and did so in one of the most insane ways possible. Reportedly, on August 9, 2012, when speaking with a lawyer for MIT, he allegedly compared Swartz to a rapist and MIT to the rape victim. I don't even want to read this quote, but this is the quote. You can pause right here and read this if you'd like. I'm surprised that Heyman didn't compare journal storage to being a victim of domestic violence who keeps going back to their abuser. Like, what are you fucking trying to say? Are you an idiot? Seems like it, brother. Also, the prosecutors are dragging this out instead of working with the defense to find reasonable middle ground resolution. What is the point of this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. The level of zeal that these crimes were approached with is, I mean, where's that energy anywhere, literally anywhere else? What is happening? Who are these people? They demanded that Swartz plead guilty to 13 felonies with no option available to him that would not result in jail time. And his attorney pleaded with the feds to find a way to resolve the case that didn't destroy Aaron's life, but they would not budge. For Swartz, accepting a felony conviction meant the end of his dreams. He feared being labeled a felon more than anything, and despite neither journal storage or MIT pursuing charges, aka the victims, though neither institution considered themselves a victim, he was completely sandbagged and just targeted by federal prosecutors. If you all don't remember, during this time, there was a lot of political targeting with the Obama administration. Swartz's case fit perfectly within that administration's unprecedented war on information activists. The administration prosecuted 8 people under the Espionage Act, more than all previous presidents combined, securing 526 months of prison time versus just 24 months in all of prior U.S. history, not to mention the bombing of so many children's hospitals. Thanks, Obama! Before Obama's presidency, only 4 people in 3 cases ever faced charges. Daniel Ellsberg and Anthony Russo in 1973, with the charges later being dropped. Samuel Morrison in 1985, which was a 24-month sentence that was later pardoned. And Larry Franklin in 2005 with a 10-month sentence. Here are some highlights under the Obama administration, the great administration of our lifetimes, it seems, which it absolutely wasn't, by the way, just in case you're unaware. It was shit too. Chelsea Manning received 35 years for WikiLeaks disclosures. NSA whistleblower Thomas Drake faced 35 years before his case collapsed. CIA whistleblower John Kirikou got 30 months for exposing a secret CIA torture program, amongst more. Ever heard of Edward Snowden? Then come the connections from Swartz to these people. They are explicit. Swartz had filed FOIA requests about Manning's treatment on December 27, 2010, just days before beginning his final journal storage downloads, and WikiLeaks later claimed he had assisted them and communicated with Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Aaron was also developing SecureDrop with Kevin Poulsen, which is a platform for anonymous whistleblowing to journalists. He also founded an insanely based website called watchdog.net in 2008 that aggregated data on political corruption, and with similar operation to change.org. Plus, his leadership in defeating SOPA had demonstrated his ability to mobilize millions of people against corporate and government power and the extensions of both. This Secret Service had over 14,000 pages of documents related to Aaron Swartz. Why? Why? What's wrong? Read the Wikipedia page, read the information on Aaron Swartz, find me what's wrong. Find me one thing. Luckily, we do have internal government communications that reveal the political nature of the prosecution. Of course, it's political. Heyman admitted he was angered by Swartz's wild internet campaign after initially allowing him to surrender without arrest. The DOJ explicitly cited his manifesto as evidence, treating his philosophy of information freedom as proof of criminal intent, which is mind-boggling. And as congressional investigators later noted, prosecutors believed they needed a felony conviction to justify having filed the case against him in the first place. God, I mean, people are bitching about freedom of speech now. Things are never more in our favor. They've never been more in our favor in terms of freedom of expression online and just in general. This is unbelievable. It's like crazy that this seems like an alternate reality. It's unbelievable. And unfortunately, there is no happy ending. This ended horribly. The prosecution ended in January of 2013 when Aaron unfortunately took his own life. After 2 years that had drained Swartz financially and emotionally, his savings were gone. He needed to raise $1 million for trial defense and dreaded making fundraising calls. And on the evening of January 10th, the day before he died, Swartz attended a friend's birthday party in Manhattan and appeared animated, was eating his favorite foods, grilled cheese and mac and cheese, but by the next morning, his mood underwent what his girlfriend, Taryn Steinbricker Kaufman, called a drastic turn. He wouldn't get out of bed despite her shaking him and pouring some water on him, and she left for work, asking friends to check on him. And that evening, January 11th, 2013, she returned to their Brooklyn apartment to pick him up for dinner, and she found Aaron's body hanging from a belt. He was 26 years old, and he left no note. Aaron's death sparked immediate outrage and demands for accountability, as well as poured gas on the fire of what he was fighting for. The prosecutors who had bullied him relentlessly for years at this point were accused of driving him to suicide, and Swartz lawyers reached out to the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility to request an investigation into U.S. Attorney Stephen Heyman. They believed that the prosecution had failed to disclose evidence and had also violated his right to a trial by jury as outlined in the Sixth Amendment through coercion. Those who were hit the hardest by his death were, of course, his family and girlfriend. His family put out a statement laying blame at the feet of the criminal justice system and MIT for maintaining neutrality throughout the case when they could have massively helped. They left with this quote: "Aaron's death is not simply a personal tragedy, it is the product of a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach. Decisions made by officials in the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office and at MIT contributed to his death. The U.S. Attorney's Office pursued an exceptionally harsh array of charges, carrying potentially over 30 years in prison to punish an alleged crime that had no victims. And meanwhile, unlike journal storage, MIT refused to stand up for Aaron and its own community's most cherished principles." At Aaron's memorial, his girlfriend Taryn gave a speech in which her message is clear and repeated throughout. She said, "Aaron's death should radicalize us." Within weeks of Aaron's death, a bipartisan congressional investigation began, with House Oversight Chairman Darrell Issa and Ranking Member Elijah Cummings demanding answers from Attorney General Eric Holder, calling the charges ridiculous and trumped up. The upgrading of Aaron's 4 charges to 13 charges is evidence of prosecutors overcharging in an attempt to stack the odds in their favor. The Stanford School of Law even believed as much, detailing how each charge is a chance for the prosecution to win, and conviction on one count could result in punishment for all of his conduct, and the only real victory would be a complete acquittal. The House Oversight investigation specifically asked whether Swartz's opposition to SOPA or his advocacy work were factors in the prosecution, which was proven by Heyman's comments on his manifesto, as well as the desperation to make anything stick to justify bringing the charges in the first place. Issa also saw this as an opportunity for Congress to take up Swartz's cause of making information freely available to the public, believing that what is paid for is as widely available as possible to the American people. Aaron's cause as a topic of discussion within Washington affecting fundamental and tangible law had begun with SOPA and POPA being toppled, but his death created a snowball effect that would continue to gain momentum through time. And in February 2013, during the Obama administration, a White House memorandum known as the Holdren Memo sought to increase access to federally funded scientific research. It wasn't perfect, obviously, and an optional 12-month embargo could be placed on publications, temporarily creating a barrier for those without the financial means or university library privileges to access content, but In August 2022, during the Biden administration, a new White House memorandum known as the Nelson Memo was released, which eliminated the 12-month embargo option, making it so all the federally funded research would be available freely without delay, which is awesome. A bipartisan bill called Aaron's Law was introduced by U.S. Representative Zoe Lofgren, Senator Ron Wyden, and Senator Rand Paul, seeking to target serious criminals better and curb overzealous prosecutions for non-malicious computer and internet offenses. Because there's nothing malicious about that at all, about what happened. Nothing at all. It's totally f***ed up. Luckily, this had support from both sides of the aisle, but private interests, of course, got in the way, because that's what happens. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle the support comes from. It matters which side of those scales, the money scales, the support comes from, and which foreign asset wants the support, wants the lobbying. Lobbying from tech companies like Oracle influenced lawmakers, and the bill died before passing in Congress. So, sucked by dick and balls. What Aaron represented is absolutely impossible to destroy, with even journal storage becoming an advocate for open access. And they, throughout time, have made their library significantly more accessible, which is huge and very important. They even have a blog page all about how open access initiatives bridge resource gaps and unlock knowledge for average people. They define open access and detail their growth in participating in the movement, making thousands of journals and ebooks open access, with over 34,000 research reports from over 140 institutions, which is really cool. They have a daily publication that covers current events with publicly available content, and they work with institutions like Cornell University, Johns Hopkins, and hundreds more to disseminate knowledge freely. And ART Store has over 800,000 freely accessible pieces contributed by museums, archives, and artists worldwide, which that's just art. It's just art, so it's not as important. But journal storage has also made it possible for individuals to access their library for free, but they're limited to viewing 100 articles per month and cannot download any access content, but they can still access it. If you want unlimited viewing and the ability to download works, you gotta still pay for it. It's $19 a month. Okay, better though, better than, you know, it's improved. And journal storage still brings in a lot of money, but the money that they're making is from institutions and governments that need large access accounts for all their employees, students, agents, etc. Or individuals like Dr. Johann Faustus, motherfuckers with the insatiable need for knowledge. The developments in open access have been a fantastic thing for the public. I use PubMed constantly, where you can find publicly funded research papers and health-related stuff just for free. You can read it. It's awesome. So there's definitely some positive, but it's not without the tragedy that it took Aaron's death to inspire a drastic change. U.S. attorneys and federal agencies sought to crucify Aaron for something that is basically normal now. And there's so many examples of this. People still serving sentences for possessing marijuana, which it's legalized, but it's very unfair. There's a lot of very unfair shit, especially when you start reading, guys, when there's open access to information. It's weird how unfair things become and how up it all looks. Aaron wasn't publicly calling for everything that's ever been written to be available to the public for free. Obviously, things like art and entertainment and shit like that should absolutely, people should be able to make money off it. People should definitely be able to make money off of their work. But if it's a publicly funded research paper, are you kidding me? What the fuck? The Twilight books, for example, are not foundational to modern society. They should not be made open access. I'd pay for them for sure. Is Audible stifling human innovation by keeping the 29-hour-long combined audiobooks of the extended edition of the original book, as well as a gender-swapped retelling, by charging $22 to $31.50 to access them? Accessing scholarly musings like that for free would be piracy. It would be wrong. But like journals, publicly right? Aaron had utilized legitimate means to obtain free access to Pacer and journal storage through institutions that gave access to their guests. And not to mention, those institutions didn't even give a fuck. So what if you actually commit real piracy? What happens then? What if you commit piracy on an even grander scale than Aaron Swartz allegedly didn't? Or did, or didn't, or did? You'll be held liable for your actions, right? Like, what if you actually break the law? You'll be held liable for your actions, right? You'll be held liable for your actions, right? Not if you pirate over 180,000 books to train your AI model, seems like. Back in January of this year, it was widely reported that Meta, the company behind Facebook and Instagram, had been pirating millions of books, articles, and magazines under direction from CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Meta downloaded the Library Genesis dataset, which contains 7.5 million books and 81 million research papers, along with the Books Cubed dataset of 180,000 plus pirated books, totaling 81.7 terabytes of copyrighted material obtained via torrenting sites. Library Genesis, LibGen, and Books Cubed are shadow libraries of pirated books and other writings and works. And internal meta communications show employees explicitly acknowledged using a dataset we know to be pirated, with one noting that torrenting from a corporate laptop doesn't feel right. Are you kidding me? Despite Meta employees recognizing the legal risk as medium high, Mark Zuckerberg personally approved using LibGen after the issue was escalated to MZ. I assume that's Mark Zuckerberg, broccoli head. Meta employees systematically removed copyright notices, ISBNs, and all rights reserved text to conceal their piracy, and even actively seeded torrents, distributing the pirated content to other users. One director even admitted that licensing even one single book would undermine their plan to claim it fell into fair use, revealing they chose piracy as faster and cheaper than legal licensing. Mind you, I think piracy's fine if you don't have money. You're not gonna buy something anyways. I don't really give a at all. I've never pirated anything ever in my life. I was very rich growing up on the internet. Extremely money and wealth. Seems like, though, when corporations do it, it's fine. I'm sensing a juxtaposition here of when one man does it for a greater cause versus when $1 trillion company does it to make an AI model so we can ruin humanity. In response to a message from Lawrence van der Matten discussing the beliefs from team members that Meta should spend more on actually licensing data, specifically textbooks, Sergey Edenov, the director of engineering at Meta, responded by saying, "The problem is that people don't realize that if we license one single book, we won't be able to lean into fair use strategy, so we will have to drop all the LibGen and book datasets." Huh? He said that? That's crazy. Sergey also says that there are many issues with book licensing. Man, can you imagine the headaches that morals and ethics create for a $2 trillion company? They turn to piracy. Because it was too inconvenient and too costly to try and source books to train their AI models legitimately through, licensing them properly. So they can then make money off their AI, by the way. To be clear too, I'm all for fair use. I'm all for adding to shit, but training an AI with books that you're downloading illegally is just not. How can you even argue that? We can only argue if we spend no money. Other conversations between staff trying to figure out the best route to source large sets of books reveal the discussion of sites like Books Cubed. And they compare that to potentially paying $300 a book to license them commercially. So, they just stole them all, I guess. Genius! It's clear they knew exactly what they were doing, cutting corners. They referenced the fair use angle, a legally gray area, setting up GenAI, their AI organization, to take the fall, saying they should be less risk-averse. And Xavier Martinet, a research engineer at GenAI, straight up references the colloquialism, "ask for forgiveness, not for permission." What? And then says that a gazillion startups just pirated tons of books on BitTorrent, almost as if saying, if they're doing it, why shouldn't we? The contrast with the treatment of Swartz is staggering. Swartz wasn't being pursued by any of the institutions that he victimized, but still the government pursued him for allegedly illegally downloading vast amounts of information that typically required payment, but he found a legal way to access it for free. And in Meta's case, the government's not going after them at all. So that's good. They face 0 criminal charges despite clear evidence of knowing and deliberately pirating on an unprecedented scale to train an AI model. So there's no federal prosecution, but Meta was the target of lawsuits for copyright infringement from authors and even comedian Sarah Silverman. Plenty of lawsuits. But Meta obviously continues normal operations, facing only civil lawsuits from authors. OpenAI, Google, and other tech giants have engaged in similar practices using pirated data sets, yet still do not face criminal prosecution. So you can do it as long as you're not a guy. You have to be a massive conglomerate and have billions of dollars, and then you can do it. But if you're just a guy with a manifesto and principles, you can't do it. It's illegal when you do it like that. It's illegal. The main difference seems, though, that Aaron Swartz was an activist who was then hounded to death for downloading academic articles he had legal access to read, and Meta, a trillion-dollar company, systematically pirated millions of books with CEO approval, removed copyright notices to hide their crimes, and faces absolutely no federal criminal consequences whatsoever. It's baffling. It's baffling. It's very surprising, but also exactly what I expected. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this. If you enjoyed, press the like button down below. Go to the Gump Club to see uncensored versions of these videos, and go to sour.gg to buy some candy. I have a candy company that I own with my wife, and we operate it locally.
One particularly.
I'm actually a little bit afraid to make this video, and you'll find out why maybe a third of the way through or something. I'm not sure. This is a wild story though. Well, hello everyone. It's me, Upavip. You know something real scary? Story about this fella named Indrid Cold. Little guy.
During the 1960s in West Virginia, at the same time period of the Mothman sightings, a man encountered a strange humanoid being with a disturbing grin that shook him to his core.
Something that has always piqued my interest, even as a child, has been the idea of potentially being visited by an extraterrestrial being. It all started with me watching the movie Signs. Ever seen it? I watched that movie, and I don't think I slept for 2 years after it. I don't really remember exactly what happened. It wasn't because of like anxiety or anything, but I was afraid of aliens. And now to this day, I still have dreams about getting probed hard all night.
I wanna dance
All night.
And that's what spurred the creation of this video.
The man in the car makes note of one particularly weird aspect of the creature's appearance. That of his ever-present and never-changing smile. The creature calls himself Indrid Cold.
The following video you're about to watch is about Indrid Cold, aka the Grinning Man. Potentially, in my opinion at least, some of the most interesting UFO alien stories that exist. So strap in, my friends. If you want to see more content like this, press the like button down below, go to gump.club, join the Gump Club, watch uncensored videos, and get discounts on Sour Boys. Go to sour.gg, buy some candy. Every single bag helps so much, because these videos are getting really long and hard to make, and I don't like it anymore. I need more money! For real though, we release a new flavor of Sour Boys every week, or we try our best. We have like 40 employees now across the board. It's incredible. There's nothing like it on YouTube. It's a great product. Please, if you guys like candy, go support it. It's just candy. There's nothing special about it other than it being made by us, and it's like unique, cool flavors. Anyways, guys, enjoy YouTube in moderation as well as anything else. The story today begins in Marietta, Ohio, a small town at the confluence of the Ohio and Muskingum rivers. In the 1960s, Marietta had just under 17,000 residents, while Mineral Wells, Woody's home, has a mere 2,000 as of 2010. So, small city, medium-sized, kind of big city almost, in some ways. Still quite rural though, important to remember. These two towns are connected by forested roads that wind past the outskirts of Parkersburg, a city nearing 30,000 residents today. As Mr. Darren Berger passed Parkersburg, West Virginia Berger in early November 1966 while driving on the quiet Interstate 77. Once again, it was very quiet. It was a quiet night on that night in early November 1966.
10 people died in the Bronx last night due to a fire that killed 10 people in the Bronx last night during a fire.
The road was empty and there were no motorists when suddenly he noticed a set of headlights speeding at him in the rearview mirror, speeding at an unreasonable speed, a disturbing speed. His heart raced as he kept an eye on the strange vehicle gaining on him. A vehicle that at first he believed to be a speeding car, as anyone would. But then, as Woody checked his mirrors, the vehicle would vanish without a trace, leaving an unsettling silence. Then, a loud humming sound filled the air, a deep it vibrated his entire truck. The lights had disappeared, and I'm sure Woody's mind was racing with questions, guys. Was his mind playing tricks at him? What the happened? Before he could comprehend, the vehicle reappeared, this time directly in front of his car.
And just before I came to the intersection of Route 47, there was a car past me, overtaking me from behind, and following closely behind this car was this unidentified flying object. And as the car ahead, or the car behind passed me, this object was following close behind it, and it swerved directly in front of my truck, turning crosswise.
The vehicle was close, but not close enough that he needed to slam on the brakes. Instead, he was able to come to a controlled stop, ABS stop. The mysterious vehicle hovered above the road, casting an otherworldly glow. Hey guys, it's starting to sound like a alien! Sorry guys. Sometimes I have outbursts whenever I get excited about things. Woody described this craft, aka vehicle, later as looking like an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney, flaring at both ends, narrowing down to a small neck, and then enlarging in a great bulge in the center. Like a, you know, like one of these things. I mean, it's kind of weird looking. It's kind of bizarre. I wouldn't have a car that looked like that. It was unlike anything old Woodrow had ever seen. As Woody sat there on the floor, a door on the side of the vessel slowly opened, and out stepped a man appearing to be in his mid to late 40s, dressed in dark-colored clothing. Woody remembers that the man's presence was unnerving, and there was something profoundly off about him. Though exactly what was causing the stirring feeling of discomfort wouldn't become clear until the figure approached Mr. Woody. Sorry, Mr. Beringheimer Berger, or whatever the... As this man began to walk towards Woody's truck, the door of the craft closed, and it began to float upwards, disappearing into the night sky, leaving behind the man. All right, guys, what the... That's probably one of them Yukons, them Chevy Yukons. Them things been known to do that. That's no otherworldly craft. That's just a 1999 Chevy Yukon, available at your local auto bargain store for $941, not including tax and tags. As the man reached Woody's door, he noticed that he had an extremely wide smile with all of his teeth prominently showing, and this is where you guys are going to start to find some level of familiarity with this story. This is Indrid Cold, aka the Smiling Man, one of the most disturbing unknown creatures, people, mysteries that exists, in my opinion. There's nothing scarier than someone happy, someone joyous. Specifically in this story we're talking about today, the smile was unnatural. It was too wide, too fixed. It was like someone had been told how to smile, how to form a smile, but they didn't know what a smile should look like. As the man approached Woody's vehicle, he gestured to have the window rolled down. Woody obviously complied. As the window rolled down, Woody prepared himself for what was about to happen. Nothing could have prepared him, though, to be honest, because the man's smile remained as he communicated to Woody. He communicated telepathically. He said, "Why are you frightened? We mean you no harm. Why are you frightened? Why are you frightened? We mean you no harm. The words echoed in Woody's mind, clear as day yet unspoken by the smiling man. The man introduced himself as Indrid Cold from planet Lanulos. This foreigner continued to communicate, asking about the lights in the distance and inquiring about Parkersburg.
They took our jabs! They took your jabs!
They took your jabs! Took your jabs! Woody explained that Parkersburg was a city, a place of business where many people lived, and Indrid, for some reason, decided to interject here and respond that on his planet, cities were called gatherings. That's cringe. All right, Indrid, that's weird.
Woody heard the words and understood them, but the man's mouth didn't move. He just kept on smiling like this. The man asked Woody his name and said he's called Cold, and he was a searcher from the planet Lanulos. Then Mr. Cold asked Woody some mundane questions about the town they were in, what kind of work Woody did, and basic small talk. And after a few minutes of friendly conversation, Mr. Cold said telepathically that he had to be going.
Their conversation, although brief, was incredibly bizarre and surreal, and to be honest, if that would have happened to me, I would have shit myself. I would have shit in my pants, and I would have gotten taller because of the shit underneath my ass on the seat of the vehicle.
My God. It must be over 100 Kuriks!
Indrid's calm demeanor was incredibly unsettling and contrasted sharply with the circumstances.
Derenberger tells us that he was so afraid that he wasn't able to look Cold in the eyes, and that several times Cold requested that he look at him.
According to Woody, he seemed genuinely interested in learning about Earth, yet there was an unsettling undertone to his curiosity, something uncanny. Woody couldn't shake the feeling that he was being studied, like an insect under a magnifying glass. The conversation between Indrid and Woody only lasted a few minutes, but Cold reassured Mr. Woodrow that they would meet again soon. With that, he turned and walked back towards his hovering vessel, the 1999 Yukon. The craft descended a small bit, the door opened, Cold stepped inside, went, and then he went, Zoo! Or whatever. That's what I like to imagine. It actually made no sound at all.
After the interaction was over, Cold was said to have bid Derenberger good night, but not before telling him, "We will see you again." He then boarded his spaceship, where Derenberger claimed to have seen the outline of another man in the doorway of the craft. With that, the spaceship ascended, and for the most part, that is where the mysterious tale ends.
Yes, so the vehicle lifted into the sky and disappeared as mysteriously as it had appeared. All right, guys. Woody, shaken up, sat in his truck for a few minutes and then drove home immediately, calling the police to report the strange encounter. The next day, Woody was interviewed by local media, where he provided more details about his bizarre experience.
Mr. Derenberger has a very interesting story to tell us this evening. I will give you a thumbnail sketch to begin with. Whether or not you believe in unidentified flying objects or not is not the point.
During the interview, Woody emphasized that Indrid never moved his mouth and communicated with him telepathically.
This was all mental. There was no spoken words from him. I knew what he was asking me, but yet he stood there and his mouth did not move. He had a smile on his face. He appeared very courteous and friendly.
Which is crazy. I mean, that's not something that happens, I don't think. It was obviously this detail that fascinated and unsettled interviewers, because it's like magic stuff, you know, and doesn't really make a lot of sense in our current understanding of how things work and how people talk to each other. Woody, given the opportunity, also described the ship in greater detail. He said it was charcoal colored and shone in his truck's headlights.
This object was between a real dark gray and black. I would call it a charcoal color. It glistened in my headlights. My headlights, when it stopped me, my headlights were shining directly on it.
But it had no lights or windows.
Were there lights in it?
No, I see no lights of any kind. There was no lights in it.
There were windows.
If there was windows, I couldn't detect them. I couldn't see them.
The craft was 30 to 35 feet long. It blocked the entire two-lane highway and hovered about 8 to 10 inches off the ground at its lowest point.
And I would say it was approximately 30 to 35 feet long, and it came directly across past my truck and immediately turned sideways. It was completely across the two-lane highway. It completely blocked me. I went partly off of the road onto the berm to try to go around it, but I couldn't get around it.
And while Cold spoke to Woody, he occasionally glanced at the ship after it had risen once Cold got out, where it was hovering 50 to 75 feet above the ground before it later descended to collect Mr. Cold, and then went.
Occasionally, as I was talking to this man, I looked up and it was still there. It was approximately 50 to 75 feet off of the ground, and it stayed there all the time this man was talking to me.
Later, Woody likened the sound of the ship to that of a helicopter.
Well, if you've ever heard the blades of a helicopter as it was idling, setting on the ground, that would be the closest way that I can describe the noise it made.
He even mimicked the noise somewhat in a comical manner during the interview.
Can you make a noise that it sounds like? Or you...
It was a fluttering noise. It sounded something like...
But it's a sound you have never heard before.
I had never heard anything like it before in my life.
This is really creepy. I hope this is all fake. This is all real, by the way, not from a movie, just in case you guys were wondering. This is all legitimate. This is all interview. This is what happens back home in West Virginia. You ever been to Appalachia? Yeah. You ain't seen shit like this unless you have. Woody also described Cold's appearance meticulously. He had a top coat zipped down from the front, a shiny metallic outfit with a darker shirt and a cloth pant. Man, this guy had style!
He had a top coat on, and it was zippered down the front. His top, the top two buttons, like my coat here, were open, and this outfit was a shiny material. It was a glossy outfit. Like it was metallic, I suppose you would call it. And his shirt was a little bit darker than his jacket.
And apparently Cold's skin was tan.
His face looked like he had a good tan, a deep suntan. He was not too dark, but it was just like he had been out in the sun a lot and had a good tan.
His hair was brown, and it was combed straight back, and he had very normal features. Almost too normal, like normal Bob, or whatever that SpongeBob with the smooth... Is it normal, Bob? Well, hi there. Hi, how are you? Or however he says it. He's just a regular-ass Midwesterner from Minnesota or from Iowa or something like that.
Tom, how are you?
This guy just looks so normal that it freaked poor Woody out. And I don't blame him. Whenever I see normal-looking people, I get freaked out too, and I start hitting them. A good analogy is a similar one to the smile. The bizarre nature of the smile. It looked like someone was told what a smile might be and was told to mimic that. It's like, this is what a human probably looks like. This is what you should probably look like. Every single thing about Indrid, from his smile to his features to his sick fit, would fall into the Uncanny Valley. By the way, the Uncanny Valley is this. It's pretty cool. If you don't know, you probably always hear people talking about the Uncanny Valley. This is what it is. It's pretty unique. Now, this all seems very far-fetched and... always hear people talking about the Uncanny Valley. This is what it is. It's pretty unique. Now, this all seems very far-fetched and unbelievable, especially in the 1960s in Ohio and West Virginia. The interviewer himself even asked Woody if he drank, trying to find some kind of logical explanation for at least some of this. A bizarre, surreal tale.
You drink?
No, I do not drink.
I mean, you don't drink intoxicating beverages?
No, I do not drink any intoxicating beverages at all. I don't believe in drinking, and I just don't.
Woody, as we all hoped, insisted that he was sober, implying that the encounter was real and not a figment of an altered mind. The man is on the straight and narrow.
Get there in your kid's school too.
And this is real. Hey guys, I believe it. And you should too. Near the end of this really strange interview, Woody mentioned that he believes others must have also seen the conversation, as during the encounter, vehicles were passing by on the highway.
But no one slowed down or
No one slowed down.
But they would have easily been able to see him.
Yes, they
Do you
could
suppose
have seen
maybe
him.
somebody in our audience might have passed you last evening, standing there talking with this fellow?
I know that there was several cars past me, and one car, as this thing settled down in front of me, was coming to meet me. And when this thing was directly in front of me, this car came to meet me. And his headlights it was in a kind of a curve. This guy came to meet me, would be making a left-hand curve, and his lights would be shining off to the right. But I still think that he could have seen and probably did see.
So there was witnesses that night on 77 outside of Parkerburg. So Woody has this crazy experience with this man named Indrid, goes immediately on the local news and is interviewed. After the interview was broadcast, Woodrow Derenberger's life changed dramatically. He became a local hero, a local celebrity, and the story gained widespread popularity. People were seeking him out from around the world, bombarding him with questions, desperate to understand his otherworldly encounter. Hey! Woody, tell me, how was it? He seemed strangely calm about all of it. If some guy smiling, and he said he was gonna meet him again, some guy smiling like that, hung out with me, and then I talked about it, made a big deal about it, and then he also said he was gonna meet, I would be worried about that every single night of my life for the rest of my fucking existence. But we get into it, guys. He comes back. And speaking more to that negative side, not everyone was buzzing with excitement over the rumored encounter with an extraterrestrial. As Woody tried to return to normal life, he quickly realized that his encounter with Indrid was only the beginning. Of course, guys, little did he know, the real nightmare was about to unfold at his own doorstep. Why did you have to make such a big deal out of it? Even me talking about it, I feel like I'm gonna get harassed. I'm scared to make this video. That's how much of a pussy I am with this shit. I don't care about demons, ghosts, but aliens and intelligence communities. I love making videos about them, but I'm afraid they're gonna come after me. After the initial interview with WTAP-TV the day following Woody's encounter with Mr. Cold, Woody's story spread like wildfire. Newspapers picked up the story. The Raleigh Register placed it on the top of their front page just 2 days later. The Cumberland Evening Times in Maryland also featured a column about Woody's encounter on their page 5. Woody Derenberger became a local legend, a household name in the area, which is a small area, but it happened overnight. And living in the small town of Mineral Wells, it wasn't long before people discovered where he lived, and he got doxxed and swatted a lot. Just kidding, but actually, from that moment, his home was no longer a sanctuary. At all times of the day and night, people would come and visit Woody, desperate for interviews and answers. News stations swarmed every part of Woody's life. Everyone wanted to talk to the guy who had allegedly seen an alienoid. As you can imagine, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Even late at night, strangers knocked on his door, begging him to retell the story that they had heard 1,000 times. When everything first started happening, Woody and his family tried their best to accommodate the curious visitors, but they then quickly found out the negative, parasitic, bizarre nature that parasocial relationships can bring, and they learned to not do that. But at one point, Woody's wife was even serving cookies and engaging with guests who were eager to hear more about her husband's encounter with Indrid. One evening after work, Woody would return home and find a long line of cars parked on the road, all waiting to hear his story. The crowd in his yard was massive. He estimated 150 people, a proper fucking crowd of strangers that scared his wife and children, who felt increasingly unsafe with the continuous presence of just strangers all the time. And the constant harassment extended beyond that, obviously. Woody's son faced ridicule at school, with classmates calling his family liars, accusing them of fabricating the story for fame, because we've seen that. There was that little kid who his parents said got taken away by those balloons that one time, and he was actually just in the house. That shit was crazy. It's happened a lot. There's been many stories that have been fabricated for fame, money, clout. It was just bad. Woody had become harassed in his own home, and no semblance of normalcy seemed to be within reach. And his family, himself, his children were all at the end. But luckily, Indrid Cold came back and made another visit and paid them another visit, guys, to make everything better. Or it just furthered the mystery and fear. Late one night, around 11 p.m., Woody Derenberger came home to find Indrid Cold waiting for him once again. This time, Indrid wasn't alone. He had brought a friend named Carl Ardo. Clearly a made-up name. That's a bullshit name. Sorry, Carl, I don't buy it. You're not a human. You're a monster. Look at this son of a bitch. The three of them sat in Woody's yard, engaging in a conversation that defied all logic and earthly understanding. As they talked, the atmosphere grew more and more surreal, similar to the first conversation that Indrid had with Woody. Indrid and Carl then invited Woody to see their ship up close, and he was intrigued and excited by this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. By the way, I wouldn't do that. I don't know if you guys, if a alien guy that looks like this came up to you and was like, hey, want to check out my craft? I don't think I would. I'd be like, oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I actually, there's a lot of poop in my ass, and I have to shit really bad. So unless you want me to like shit in it, But he eventually, for some reason, followed them to the mysterious craft, the same one that he had seen before. And when they reached the ship, they asked Woody if he would like to come aboard and explore the interior. Woody, despite his apprehension, could not resist the chance for more fame and harassment, apparently. Inside the ship, Woody was met with sights that were beyond his comprehension. Yet again, this guy cannot comprehend much. One particular feature that caught his eye was a bright blue panel. Driven by curiosity, he reached out and touched it. Instantly, the door shut with a loud thud. Panic set in as Woody thought they were taking him against his will. However, Indrid calmly explained that Woody himself had triggered the door's closure. What an idiot. What a fool. He's like one of those henchmen turning knobs arbitrarily to seem busy in Austin Powers.
Not you, henchman, arbitrarily turning knobs, making it seem like you're doing something.
The realization that touching a button on this blue panel led to closing the door astounded Woody, because this is like the 60s. It's a long time ago. The doors were far too large and powerful to be operated manually, so there had to be some kind of sophisticated hydraulic system responding to his touch as if by magic. You know, this is before really computers that weren't the size of houses, and also before touch screens and any of the cool shit we've got now, fellow iPad babies. Once Woody regained his composure following the door incident, Indrid posited an intriguing question. Hey Woody, if you could go anywhere, where would you want to go, Woody? Woody, for some reason, without hesitation, mentioned the Amazon jungle. The ship then vibrated, and astonishingly, the windows opened to reveal the Amazon below. It went beep, 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 beep. Woody looked down below and gazed in awe at the sight of the lush forests and winding rivers and villages teeming with life. I don't know if that's accurate for the Amazon, but that's what he said. So, the sight of the Amazon from above was breathtaking for Woody. But luckily for Woody, the journey didn't end there. Next stop, the moon. The ship quickly transported to Earth's moon, guys. Here, they linked up with the mothership, or flagship, as they called it. It was a colossal vessel that dwarfed the one that they were in. You know, that little funny shape one, the little pregnant woman one. Woody marveled at the sheer scale of the flagship. It is advanced technology far beyond anything on Earth, which is super based, super red-pilled, also very scary. But next, guys, they went to somewhere even more extraordinary. That is Lanulos, Indrid Cold's home planet. They went to a gathering. And it is at this point I start to wonder how verifiable of a source of information this Woody guy is. This is starting to seem crazy. All right, but shit, I still believe him. I believe that son of a... Let's all have a little piece of ginger together, all right? It's good for the gut. So obviously this ship was traveling at speeds that defy human understanding, like everything else that's happening along here. And before long, they went to Lanulos. They arrived there. Apparently Lanulos is a place of beauty and strangeness, and Arby's. There was Arby's there, which I thought was very strange and sort of unexpected. Bit of a red... right turn I wouldn't have expected. A red herring, I was going to say. We have the meats. Arby's. I love Arby's. Do you guys like Arby's? Most people hate Arby's. Comment down below what you think. Woody saw vast fields, dense forests, clear rivers, all on Lanulos. Some gatherings, as they call it, all bustling with life, busting with life. Woody also noticed cars hovering without wheels. They were hovering smoothly above the ground, people going about their daily lives, all very handsome and slick. Smoothly above the ground, people going about their daily lives, all very handsome and slick. All right, guys. Beautiful, beautiful outfits. He wondered to himself, are all these people gay? Indrid introduced Woody to his wife and children. Seems like bullshit. They greeted him warmly. The Cold family was strikingly normal, yet everything about their world felt different, particularly the way that they looked. They visited apparently this place called Number 27 Gathering, a city that showcased the technological and cultural marvels of Lanulos. Woody saw stores, factories, all similar in purpose to those on Earth, but operating with an efficiency and elegance that was out of this world. Yeah, pretty good. Anyways, during their exploration, Indrid asked Woody if he would like to meet another Earth family who had been brought to Lanulos almost 40 years ago. That's kind of scary, to be honest. People getting kidnapped. Anyways, Woody declined. Luckily, he felt a strong sense of duty. He declined, saying that he wanted Earth to be more like Lanulos. He would leverage the knowledge and advancements of this otherworldly society to benefit humanity back on Earth. What a good guy Woody was. With their tour of Lanulos complete, it was time for Woody to return to Earth. I just want him to rip him up a little bit. I feel like Indrid Cold looks so creepy and scary, but it's more like a Richard Byrd situation. You go to the center of the Earth and everybody's really chill, you know? I feel like the Dark Forest theory is the only reasonable explanation for life outside of Earth, you know? The Dark Forest theory, very scary. I feel like an Indrid Cold and a Dark Forest theory would be so scary. I don't like people that look like this, you know, joyous people. Anyways, Woody boarded the spaceship once more.
The Dark Forest theory truly is terrifying. It's a very scary thought.
Forest theory would be so scary. I don't... You know, the Dark Forest theory. Very scary. I feel like an Indrid Cold and a Dark Forest theory would be so scary. I don't like people that look like this. You know, joyous people. Anyways, Woody boarded the spaceship once more and they made their journey back to Earth, landing safely around 10 p.m. So yeah, this is all real, by the way. This all actually happened according to Woody Derenberger. His journey to Lanulos offered him a profound glimpse into alien society that is unlike anything here on Earth, guys. A profound glimpse that no one else has ever been able to see, except for me, every night against my will in my dreams, right? I don't like aliens, and they always visit me in my dreams a lot, and T-Rexes as well, a lot of those. Woody described the people from Lanulos in his book, Visitors from Lanulos. He said that they lived in a utopia free from the concepts of hate and secrets. Their ability to communicate telepathically apparently led to no secrets, because no thoughts could be hidden. It fostered a community built on transparency and understanding and smiles. It was also a classless society. Everyone lives equally there. Leaders were seen as no better than those who performed manual labor, such as digging ditches. They even dig ditches on Lanulos. There was no hierarchy, no class division. There was an absence of greed and an abundance of resources. Money had no value. Instead of being paid by the job, individuals were compensated based on the size of their families, ensuring that everyone had enough to meet their needs, which is pretty cool, I guess. I mean, what are these, commies? Because, like, it's starting to sound like they're commies, and I don't know if I like that. So, as anyone in the 60s would do, Woody asked them, with some earthly skepticism, "Are you all communist?" The Lanulosians explained that they lived by the free will of the people, whatever the f that means. Their system was not driven by an ideology, but by a collective commitment to the well-being of all, which I guess makes sense. And, like, you know, on paper, that a lot of ideologies work really, really well. But when you mix human nature in there, if everyone could communicate telepathically and you could just hear someone's thoughts and then decide whether or not you want to kill them with a stone because of their thoughts, because I feel like most people's thoughts, if you could hear them, you would want to kill them with a stone. I don't know, that's probably just me. I feel like if people heard my thoughts, they'd want to kill me with stones. Just kidding. Also, just to make matters even worse and really brag even more, the people of Lanulos were extremely attractive and physically fit. No one was under or overweight. Woody attributed this all to their healthy lifestyle and diet. Also, Ozempic. That's where Ozempic came from. Lannulose. The people of Lannulose live long lives, often surpassing 100 years. Nudity was also the norm. Huge 8.5-inch cocks on average. Shit was incredible. I was there with Woody. Me and my friend Woody went to Lannulose a while back. Clothing in their society was only worn for protection against the cold or during certain jobs that required it, such as working in factories where there were, you know, you would required to be wearing heat protective gear, or like, you know, a sandblaster. Anyways, in spite of their alien ways, the Lannulosians engaged in activities that seemed familiar. They worked, played sports like volleyball. They had various means of relaxation, for example, like wild apes, wild chimps. Their relationships, though, are quite different from those on Earth. Casual flings are unheard of on Lannulose, so the like apes is not a real thing. But if a couple found themselves incompatible, they could amicably find new partners. I don't know, dude. They're pretty cool. It just shows you, if they are real, that there is quite a commitment to harmony, and, you know, all that's based on understanding. And guys, I think I might be a Lannulosian at heart, or whatever. If it's real, of course. I don't know, the jury's still out on whether or not it's real. The people of Lannulose truly did not understand the concepts of war or hatred. Those concepts were equally as alien to their society as their concepts are to our society. Their society was free of conflict, filled with mutual respect, and it left a lasting impression on Mr. Woody from Mineral Wells, West Virginia. Summarizing their way of life, Woody often reflected on how these Marxist aliens lived in a state of natural harmony, walking around naked and devoid of the conflicts that plagued Earth. Their civilization, though strange to him, was a beacon of what humanity could aspire to be. A world without war, hatred, or inequality. And also a world with fear. Look at this guy. Are you shitting me, dude? If this guy appeared at any point and didn't make himself known before, I'd just blast him. I would just start beating him, blasting him, and knowing him, he's probably got like a black belt in Lannulosian Taekwondo or some shit, so he'd probably kick my jaw out of socket, and then he'd be like, I'm sorry, but I saw that coming before you even did it. It's because I can speak telepathically. Your thoughts, they're mine. Die, white boy. I'm tan. So Woody's encounter and experience with the people of Lannulose and Injured Cold, which I didn't see the Lannulose shit coming. I'm not sure if it's normal to see a alien and then just expect that the story eventually goes on to a guy abandoning his family to go visit a planet Lannulose to hang out with Marxist aliens. This first sighting occurred only a few weeks before Woody's encounter in October 1966, but in New Jersey instead of the Ohio, West Virginia area. So 2 young boys reported seeing a strange man in a metallic green suit leaning on a fence. Intrigued, they approached him only to be met with a huge, unsettling grin. He was happy. Not a lot of happy people in New Jersey. The man also began to chase them, which is very scary. The boys fled in terror, as boys would when a smiling, metallic-suited green man would... that would make me run as well. This report coincided with referencing. It's kind of cool. A lot of cross-referencing in the UFO world. Plus, the description provided by the boys was chillingly similar to Woody's account. The man was over 6 feet tall and dressed in a sparkling green coverall costume that shimmered and reflected the street lights. There was a wide black belt around his waist. He had a very dark complexion and little round, real beady eyes set far apart. Look like this. They also noted the absence of hair, ears, and a nose, and couldn't recall if he had hands, whether or not, which is pretty wild. Imagine not having hands, dude. So yeah, the mold of this fella definitely fits the mold of Injured Cold, although the boys didn't know it at the time. The second sighting after the boy sighting is more contentious in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, only about an hour south of Parkersburg, where Woody and his family had an encounter. A family reported experiencing poltergeist activity in their home, and amidst these strange occurrences, their daughter claimed to see a man at the foot of her bed. She described him as a tall, broad man with a sinister grin, and he walked around her bed, and as she hid under the covers screaming, she peeked out. He was gone. This actually happened to me, but he was like a big man, and he was shimmery. He was all shimmery and like, he wasn't really real. I was just, he walked in my door. Like, my bed was like this, basically. It was like this way, and then the door was right there at the end of the room, and he just went, and then walked over to me, and then I like, and then I flew off into space and shit. It's crazy. I don't know if it was real or just a hag dream or whatever they're called, sleep paralysis. I have a lot of sleep paralysis, so It's all good. Unlike the other encounters with Indrid, this one took place inside and involved poltergeist-like phenomena, which is sort of dissimilar to the other two, obviously. Cold was typically seen outside and never displayed such magic powers other than telepathic communication. The only similarity was the man's height and grin, leading many skeptics to believe that it was more likely related to the stress of the poltergeist activity, or perhaps a case of sleep paralysis, because it would be unreasonable if otherwise. Nonetheless, the description of the man definitely expands the lore of Indrid Cold. Which I like that, okay? I will point out the elephant in the room and say that these sightings seem more contradictory to the Indrid Cold that we've grown to understand from the story of Woody. If true, why would Woody hate kids and want them to die and stuff? Because he was so nice to Woody, and he literally took Woody back to his home planet and was like, look at all these naked people. Check this out. And then like he just chases children around and takes his nose off and has no hands. That's weird. Who is he? Is he an alien? Is there a more human explanation to these encounters? I have no idea. What the fuck? The story of Indrid Cold is cool, though. I really like it. It's one that's been on the back of my mind for a long time. And actually, we got him in a little project we're working on, a little Indrid Cold project. Not exactly, but like sort of vaguely. Not really, actually. Anything. There's this creepy man who smiles who's not from this world. So anyways, let me know down below. What do you guys think? This is real or fake? I think it's real. I believe it. The story of Indrid Cold to me is fascinating and perplexing. I love being able to see legit interview segments and actual, you know, documentation in regard to shit. I generally have a skeptical perspective, but I always want this stuff to be true. That's where I'm always coming from. I want everything insane to be true. There's an eerie quality to this story that I would like to see what you guys think. I don't know. The attempt at mimicking human facial expressions, the friendliness. I don't know, it's weird. What do you guys think? This part of the story is where things get really interesting, okay? Because we go back to the 1960s. We got this guy, Woody, who talks about it. He goes and takes interviews. This is 20 years after Roswell. This is when the government is actually starting to take UFO stuff pretty seriously. They're looking into it. The CIA has their own little UFO investigative journalist operation thing going on. There's propaganda. There's a bunch of fear. There's a bunch of just misinformation. And from the time around the Indrid Cold sighting and Woody's massive publication of all this stuff, there isn't that much evidence. But in a Raleigh Register article 2 days after the Woody encounter, it mentioned that an Air Force spokesman said to the Raleigh Register journalists that the investigation for this incident would be referred to higher authorities in Washington or the UFO Investigative Center. But the results of the investigation, if they ever even happened, were not something that we could locate with our just simple Google searches. But a declassified CIA document from January 7th, 1967 titled 1966 Good Year for UFO Reports includes a PDF of a Syracuse, New York Post Standard article detailing notable UFO sightings from September and October of 1966. It describes November, the month of Woody's encounter, as the most important month of the year for UFO sightings. This is an official CIA document. To be clear, though, it does not directly mention Woody's encounter. Here's another document right here. An Air Force UFO fact sheet that details extensive investigations into UFOs between 1947 and 1969. Of the 12,618 sightings reported, 701 remained unexplained. In 1966 alone, there were 1,112 sightings, and 32 of those remained unidentified. This is big because the government couldn't even be like, hey, that's just a weather balloon flipping upside down from China that's playing H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds and causing mass hysteria. Or more reasonable explanations for debunked sightings that included material objects, balloons, immaterial phenomena like lightning, or astronomical objects like stars, fucking ball lightning, all that shit. Those lights, what are those lights called? I forget. Either way, these explanations don't really touch the Woody Indrid, to be honest, because like he had him roll down his window and was like, how are you doing? Would you like to come to my planet? Yeah, big difference between all that debunk shit and asking a truck driver what a city is. That's crazy. So in the end, attempts to investigate injured Cold's appearance in 1966 seem fairly sparse. A 417-page annotated bibliography on UFOs prepared by the Library of Congress in 1969 includes a few lines related to UFO. Later, Woody likened this dark forest theory as the only reason he walked in. December 15th, 1967, 5:04 p.m. Rush hour in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The Silver Bridge stretches across the Ohio River like a steel lifeline connecting the small town of Point Pleasant to the world beyond. That world being Ohio. Built in 1928 as an engineering marvel, the 700-foot suspension span had become the beating heart of this small community's daily rhythm. Thousands upon thousands of people crossing it every single day, heading home from work in various chemical plants and factories in Ohio. On this night, the bridge carried its usual burden of rush hour traffic. 50 vehicles inching along in the December darkness. Families heading home to eat dinner and hug and other stuff that happy families do. Also, people returning from shopping for Christmas errands, workers exhausted from another day at the factory, ready to go home and beat their pregnant wives. But at exactly 5:04 p.m., a single eye bar in the bridge's suspension system, a critical piece of steel just 4 inches wide, developed a hairline crack. The flaw is microscopic, invisible to the naked eye, and is the result of stress corrosion that has been building for decades. Classic bridge style. In the span of time it would take a heart to beat, the crack becomes a fracture, and the fracture becomes a break, and then the entire structure catastrophically collapses in less than a minute. And 50 vehicles plunge 60 feet into the black waters of the Ohio River on a December night. 46 people died as a result of this tragic event. And somehow this is the beginning, but also the climactic finale of the story of the Mothman. That's right, the West Virginia cryptid, the Point Pleasant legend. You've probably heard of the Mothman if you've played Fallout, the bad one, Fallout 76. You've seen him flying around. The story and legend of the Mothman begins a year before this event when something impossible appeared in the skies above this small Appalachian town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Something that would still kind of haunt Point Pleasant and definitely transform it to this very day. But it doesn't really haunt it that much anymore. It's the story of the Mothman, okay? It's a very interesting, scary story with a lot of realism and a lot of myth, and we're gonna be parsing through it, and I'm gonna be giving you my 2 cents. Not for you though, you greedy little bastard. Let's take a step back to November 15th, 1966 at 11:30 p.m., well before I was born, and well after my bedtime. The abandoned TNT area spread like a concrete graveyard across the hills north of Point Pleasant. During World War II, this 2,500-acre complex churned out explosives for the war effort. It was the West Virginia Ordnance Works, and they produced up to 500,000 pounds of TNT daily at peak operation, you know, for blowing shit up. This impressive facility had massive concrete igloos that stored enough explosives to blow something up big. and or maybe level half of West Virginia. But now, 20 years after the end of the war, there's no reason to build TNT like Moses threw at white people so long ago. The building became ruins and nature started to reclaim it, but the land itself bears some invisible scars. And what rapscallion teenagers cruising the roads around and getting into stuff that they shouldn't be getting into, what they don't realize is that the soil beneath their tires and their feet remains contaminated with byproducts of TNT, chemical byproducts, compounds like 2,4-DNT and 2,6-DNT that have leached into the groundwater and soil for over decades. It's called red water. It's a toxic byproduct of TNT manufacturing, and it still seeps from the ground in some areas and creates crimson stains on the landscape like dried blood. It's fascinating, completely bizarre. And the contamination from these factories created an ecological nightmare. Vegetation in the area grows in strange patterns. In some areas, it's completely barren, while others show unnaturally accelerated growth. Fish in nearby ponds develop deformities like large penises. Something's off up in there, okay? And 15 years from 1966, this spot will be declared a Superfund site and one of the most contaminated locations in the United States. But in 1966, the full extent of the environmental damage remained hidden. And still at that time period, the area carried an aura of wrongness. We was aura farming in World War II, and we fell off after, I guess. I don't know. Casual visitors notice the wrongness and the sense of dread there. Animals behave strangely there. Electronics malfunction there without explanation, and the very air seems to hum with an energy that raises the hair on the back of your nutsack. There's a bug. Vines snake through broken windows, trees grow from cracks in the foundation, and the place has become a favorite spot for local teenagers seeking privacy and whatever teenagers seek, a spot to smoke weed. And unfortunately, it is about to become ground zero for something that will haunt the town of Point Pleasant for over a year. On this night, two young couples are driving the winding Appalachian dirt roads through the complex. Roger and Linda Scarberry. Both are 19 years old and married for just 8 months. Then there's Steve and Mary Millette. They're best friends and frequent double date companions. They're riding in Roger's pride and joy, a souped-up 1957 Chevrolet that can outrun any cop car in Mason County. Hey now, dickweed. Easy there, partner. And the night air carries a damp chill of the approaching winter. Dead leaves crunch under the tires of the Chevy as they cruise past the abandoned bunkers, talking and laughing with the radio playing softly. It's the kind of harmless teenage adventure that fills small town Saturday nights. Personal experience moment incoming. We had a quarry that we would hang out at. The f***ing quarry. People died at the quarry. Quarry was a terrible idea, very scary. Every small town group of teenagers has something like this. To be clear, I wasn't really invited much to the quarry. I was homeschooled. People didn't like me. I didn't fit in, and nobody, maybe if you press like on this video, I'd feel better about it. So these youngsters are approaching the Old North Power Plant when Roger spots something unusual near the generator building. It's a creature, and it stands 7 feet tall in the headlights of the Chevy. Its body is muscular and human-like, like mine, and inhuman-like, like mine. But far too broad for any man. It's gray fur covering its torso, and its eyes freeze their blood. They are enormous red orbs, each 2 inches across and 6 inches apart, protruding from its massive head, shoulder, body, it's like a fucking Promethean from Prometheus. And or that big white orc from The Hobbit. Big ugly head, gray hair, big eyes, red eyes. Help! And as they stare at this creature in horror, it unfolds its wings. The span of its wings is massive, 10 feet from tip to tip, dark and bat-like. And the creature doesn't flap the wings so much as just stretching them like someone would after a long sleep. And its red eyes fix on the car's occupants with an intelligence that's unmistakably aware and sentient. Roger slams the Chevrolet into reverse with tires spinning in the gravel, and the creature moves towards them with a shuffling, awkward gait, almost penguin-like on the ground, but the eyes never leave the car, and the terrified passengers urge Roger to hurry the up. Roger floors the accelerator in the Chevy's V8 Big Block 459. I'm making shit up, I don't know. It roars to life and propels them down the dirt road towards Route 62. And behind them, they hear a sound like nothing they've ever heard. It's a high-pitched, metallic screech like grinding steel, something like this. Then they see it in the rearview mirror. The creature has taken flight, rising straight up like a helicopter, its massive wings spread wide, and it's following them at 60 miles an hour, then 70, then 80, and then 90. This thing is like the Usain Bolt of cryptids. Fast. Roger somehow allegedly pushes the speedometer past 100 miles per hour as they race towards the town, and the thing flies directly overhead, its wingtips occasionally dipping below the tree line, scraping against the car's roofs, and the horrible metallic screeching continues to fill their ears. By the way, this is all real. This is all real shit. Allegedly. This happened. And only when they reach the Point Pleasant city limits does the creature veer away, disappearing into the darkness above the Ohio River. The four teenagers sit in the Chevy, stunned in silence. Their hearts hammering against their ribs, and they're I don't know, they're just scared. They seem traumatized, in all honesty. And because they're not total idiots, they drive straight to the Mason County Sheriff's Office, and Deputy Millard Halstead, someone who's known the kids their entire lives and has never known them to lie, never seen them in any real trouble, talks to them, and they stammer out their story, still shaking, pale with terror, hearts beating away. He believes them. The deputy believes them. Deputy Halstead found them credible and took their report of this creature seriously. But what the deputy doesn't know, that this isn't the first sighting of this creature. This creature has been building to this moment for months, perhaps even years. In the early 1960s, a woman driving Route 2 near Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds witnessed a large man-shaped figure walk onto the road, spread its massive wings, and take off. She never reported it. You know why? Probably because she'd seemed like a crazy person. If I saw something like that, I would tell everybody. I don't give a rat's ass. I'd be like, man, I saw this big old gray sumbitch, and he stretched his wings and waved, and he had these big old red eyes. It's weird. It's really odd. The skin on his head looked like a nutsack, like a scrambled up. Like you pinch it and roll in it, like it's like one of those. There were tons of other reports. The summer of 1966 brought reports of a giant butterfly 6 feet long, and in 1965, a child saw an angel outside their home near the Ohio River. And 90 miles away in Salem, something else had been going on. Now, November 14th, 1966, in Salem, West Virginia, at 10:30 p.m., a man by the name of Newell Partridge settled into his favorite chair after a long day of construction work. His German Shepherd, a dog named Bandit, rested on his front porch, 110 pounds of loyal muscle and intelligence. Television flickered behind him with images of the Monday night movie when something, it's in this video, went horribly wrong. If anything's happening in this video, it's something's going horribly wrong. The picture dissolved into a herringbone pattern, the sound warped into a high-pitched whine, and built in intensity like a generator winding up, and the noise eventually became unbearable. It was a mechanical scream that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. I like to imagine that Newell was like this. Outside the house on the porch, Bandit, the big old dog, began to howl. Partridge switched off the television, but the whining continued, and now it was coming from beyond his house. He grabbed his flashlight, stepped onto the porch, Bandit stood rigid at the edge of the property, every muscle tense, focused on something in the darkness near the hay barn about 150 yards away. Partridge clicked on his flashlight, and two giant red circles gleamed back at him from the shine of his light. Massive, reflective like bicycle reflectors, but impossibly large to be eyes. Bandit launched himself into the darkness and charged towards the red lights, and the dog's barking grew frantic, desperate, and then suddenly stopped, and silence followed. Partridge waited behind on the front porch, flashlight trembling in his hand. He did own a shotgun and he knew how to use it, but something about the red eyes had paralyzed him with a primal fear that he never experienced. Minutes passed and Bandit doesn't return. The next morning, Partridge goes out and searches the property, and he finds Bandit's paw, detail we haven't covered yet. This is the teens that were escaping the Mothman in the story just before this. They reported seeing a large dog's body on the roadside during their escape. It was a body that mysteriously vanished when they returned to look for it, as if it was never there. And there's 90 miles between Partridge and Salem and Point Pleasant, where the teens ran into Mothman. But somehow it seemed as though Bandit had ended up dead on the road where the Mothman made his initial debut. We all know that word spreads quickly through small towns, and a small community like Point Pleasant might very well thrive on gossip and drama. Something like this doesn't really happen anywhere, and especially when you got a little small town of people seeing beasts flying around and killing their dogs. It's pretty interesting. By November 17th, reporters descended on the town. The first newspaper article appeared in the Point Pleasant Register with the headline, "Couples see man-sized bird creature something." So the story's out, but rather than ending the mystery like what happened in Bladenboro, little monster we talked about in a previous video down there in North Carolina, this publicity encouraged more witnesses to come forward. See, a lot of people have been seeing the Mothman. We'll start with Marcella Bennett, a woman who drives to the Ralph Thomas house on November 16th, her baby daughter cradled in her arms. As she steps out of her car, a shadow stirs nearby. Something gray, massive, muscular rises from the ground where it had been lying, 7 feet tall, impossibly broad, with glowing red eyes that penetrate the soul. Bennett drops her baby in terror and then immediately scoops the baby up and runs for the house. The family locks the doors. The creature doesn't leave, though. It shuffles onto the porch and peers through the windows. Can you imagine that? You just see a beast. Oh, shit! And then you drop your baby on its head, and then you pick your baby up by one leg and you run inside, and then you look at the window, and then there's just a gray guy with red eyeballs looking through the window. What the fuck? You still holding your baby? Jesus criminy and Joseph. When sheriff's deputies arrived 20 minutes later, they found deep scratches in the wood around the door frame, but no Mothman. You see, he had vanished. Bennett unfortunately suffered a nervous breakdown and required medical treatment for severe anxiety, which is no laughing matter. I also require medical treatment for severe anxiety, and also, like her, have recurring nightmares about, well, I don't dream about the Mothman, but I dream about snakes a lot. And for months afterwards, she reported hearing a keening sound near her home, like a woman screaming in agony. Something like this. Then a couple days later, November 25th, 1966, 7:15 a.m., early in the morning, we have a fellow by the name of Tom Urey, a shoe salesman, who's driving Route 62 north of the TNT area, where we talked about in the very first story, when he spotted a large grayish figure standing in a field. The creature spread its wings and lifted straight up like a helicopter, then flies over his convertible at an altitude of 3 telephone poles high, despite him driving 75 miles per hour in panic. Creature keeps circling above his car going, so that's terrifying, and 2 days later brings an even more unsettling encounter. November 27th, 1966 at 10:30 a.m. Connie Carpenter was 18 years old at the time and the niece of local reporter Mary Heyer. And she's driving home from church along Route 62 near New Haven. It's a bright Sunday morning, clear skies, perfect visibility. There should be nothing frightening about the beautiful scenic drive through Mason County after. When all of a sudden, she's passing the deserted Mason County golf course when she sees, standing in the fairway, massive and improbable, the Mothman. Broad daylight, every detail crystal clear, 7 feet tall, gray fur, enormous burning red eyes, and a big swinging cock. Connie started to slow her car as she was mesmerized in spite of her terror, and the creature's gaze locked onto hers. And then the hypnotic effect that occurred was immediate and overwhelming to her. She felt like she was being pulled into the depths of its eyes, unable to look away and unable to think it was up into the sky like an helicopter. No running start, no VTOL jet action, just smoothly vertically ascends, defies everything that Connie knows about flight and what I know about physics, and then hovers above her car to troll her for a moment, and its eyes still fixed on her face. It swoops low and follows her vehicle as she speeds towards town. This guy sounds like a dickhead. Unfortunately, Connie developed severe conjunctivitis right after this, which is inflammation of the eyes that is caused by exposure to ultraviolet radiation. The burning and swelling persisted for 2 weeks in spite of medical treatment. Doctors were baffled by the severity of the reaction. She got conjunctivitis after looking into the eyes of a demon, a monster. Feel like you got away easy. Let's be real, Connie. Quit your bitching and your bellyaching, alright? So by December of 1966, more than 30 people have reported encounters with the creature. Here's an entire list of all the encounters that have been made. Descriptions are remarkably consistent. It's 6 to 7 feet tall, broad, muscular, humanoid. It's got a 10-foot wingspan. The wings are bat-like. It's capable of vertical takeoff without having to flap or nothing like that. It's got 2 big red-ass eyes, highly reflective, hypnotic, like that toad from Futurama. Its movement is kind of clumsy and awkward on the ground. It's silent in flight, and it makes extremely high-pitched sounds and screeches when agitated, and its eyes can cause conjunctivitis, and it can interfere with televisions and cause extreme fear and stuff like that. A bunch of people up until this point had seen Mothman and experienced all these things, thus creating a pattern that we can look at. One puzzling detail that confused investigators was that reports didn't come from just one spot. The reports came from across the Ohio River Valley, Gallipolis, Ohio, Charleston, West Virginia, Huntington, West Virginia, and even as far south as Salem. Whatever this creature was, it wasn't bound by territorial limitations, kind of like the other mysterious creatures that are in Appalachia. So yeah, pretty scary. But on December 7th, 1966, a professional by the name of Richard Gere arrives. You know, that guy that put a hamster in his butt? No, it's John Keel. Richard Gere eventually played John Keel in The Mothman Prophecies, which somehow was a movie that was actually made in the 90s, and it was pretty good. I actually liked it. Richard Gere put a hamster in his butt. The real guy, John Keel, stepped off the Greyhound bus in Point Pleasant, his investigative instincts already humming. He's levitating off the ground like some kind of guy like me in my dreams. At this point, he's 46 years old, he's a journalist and a UFO researcher. He's traveled around the world chasing strange phenomena. But there's something about the Mothman reports that intrigues him to a new level. The witnesses aren't the usual UFO crowd. These are just ordinary people. Some are very credible witnesses, all reporting something genuinely unprecedented for their area. Keel checked into the Low Hotel on Main Street and immediately began conducting interviews, and what he discovered astounded him. It was incredible. So incredible, he wrote a book about it called The Mothman Prophecies. These sightings of these creatures are just the tip of the iceberg. People throughout the valley are experiencing a cascade of paranormal phenomena on top of just this red-eyed gray man. UFO sightings increased dramatically beginning in November 1966. Poltergeist activity erupted in homes throughout Mason County. Strange phone calls plagued witnesses to the gray beast, robotic voices, electronic beep, conversations in unknown languages, mugodayo, mugodayo, baby mugodayo. Plus, mysterious black Cadillacs, tinted windows are seen throughout the area. Men in black suits visit witnesses and probe them, not literally, but they ask questions about their sightings. Mary Heyer, the local reporter that we mentioned earlier for the Athens Messenger, became Keel's primary source of information. At this point, she's 54 years old and has been Point Pleasant's eyes and ears for nearly 3 decades, covering everything from county commissioners' meetings to high school football games, and now supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial phenomena. All right, fellers, phenomenal. Her office in the Mason County Courthouse served as an unofficial command center for the both of them for their investigation. Her filing cabinets bulged with witness reports, photographs of strange lights, and increasingly bizarre accounts of impossible encounters. Mary's on edge. She pops a value. think this is before Valium. I think she pops a quick. No, Mary doesn't do any of that, but she is on edge. It is the volume of reports that is unnerving her. That's what's causing her to be on edge. But even more so is what's happening to her personally since the original Mothman story. She started receiving strange phone calls just days after the first article appeared that she wrote. Late at night, her telephone would ring with mechanical voices speaking in monotone, asking bizarre questions about local UFO activity, and when she tries to trace the calls, they lead to disconnected numbers. All right, guys, just getting owned out there, mentally, psychologically. Even more disturbing to Mary are the unusual visitors. Mary reported being visited by strange men in black suits who asked probing questions about UFO activity in the area. Probing. I love saying probing. They didn't probe her, but they probe her. All right, guys. These individuals repeatedly display odd behavior and seem unnaturally interested in suppressing witness accounts. And these encounters we know left her deeply unsettled, but we don't know the exact details of their conversation. Which is very unfortunate, because I feel like if you're talking to Men in Black, you should tell me specifically. The Men in Black, the G-Men, is one of the most interesting concepts in this entire UFO paradigm that I have yet to explore. Alright? The Men in Black. I might make an entire video about MIB. Alright, guys? MIB, dude. Scary as well. These encounters did leave Mary profoundly shaken, but they don't deter her from her work. And if anything, they convince her that something genuinely extraordinary is happening in the small town of Point Pleasant, Aberdeen. Alright. And as the year started to draw to a close, the Mothman phenomenon showed no signs of fading. If anything, the activity intensified. Strange lights danced over the TNT area nightly. More witnesses came forward with stories of close encounters, and the creatures seemed to be studying the town and watching its inhabitants with those big red eyes it's got. And John Keel, being Richard Gere essentially, senses that he's stumbled onto something far more significant than just another monster sighting. Point Pleasant is becoming a ground zero for a convergence of the impossible, a potential window into dimensions beyond normal human experience. But what he doesn't know yet is that all of this strange activity is building towards something totally catastrophic. The Mothman isn't just a random anomaly, it's a harbinger of disaster. But we'll get to that. Let's rewind just a couple hours. Okay. December 7th, we're still there. 1966, the Low Hotel, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. John Keel set down his worn leather briefcase on the hotel room's narrow desk and surveyed the chaos of papers already spreading across every available surface in his computers. Newspaper clippings, witness statements, maps of the Ohio River Valley dotted with colored pins marking sighting locations, kind of like all my thumbnails, plus photographs, plus a ton of photographs of strange lights in the sky. This had to be a lot of fun. This had to be a lot of fun. Guys in black suits coming in with their eyebrows. You're like, I've seen you, Fringe. I've seen the show Fringe. And also Men in Black. You're the guy from, you're Will Smith's friend, aren't you? Well, you're Will Smith's friend, aren't you? Oh, you're green. You're not black. You're green. What are you hiding in there? What you doing in there, jacking it? I love this little guy, man, for real. He's very salty. He actually has a little bit of five spice on him. A little Chinese five spice. Weird. Stay put, little man. Things continue to accelerate here. Like I mentioned, as the year closes out, the Mothman phenomenon did not. John Keel's approach differs radically from typical UFO investigators. While others chase lights in the sky, this man focuses on patterns. He's got a little bit of the autism. Who sees what? When do they see it? And where do they see it? What connects seemingly random encounters? What is the underlying logic of the impossible? Is there something there that is rational that you can attach to? Keel's first breakthrough came from studying the Mothman timeline. This creature didn't just randomly appear on November 15th. Strange activity had been building for weeks before that. On October 18th, 1966, a pilot reported a massive bird-like creature over Huntington, West Virginia. On November 1st, 1966, there were multiple UFO sightings around Parkersburg, West Virginia. On November 12th, 1966, a man by the name of Kenneth Duncan saw a brown human being flying through the trees at the Grindin Cemetery. So, make of that what you will. On November 14th, 1966, Newell Partridge, our old buddy who lost his dog, encountered his creature in Salem. Then on November 15th, 1966 came the Scarberry Mallet sightings that launched the public phenomenon, the kids getting chased by cars at 90 miles an hour. Something. There's a song there somewhere. I don't know. Keel noted how individual incidents that seemed unrelated began to form a discernible pattern when they were viewed from 10,000 feet up. When you can look down on the whole thing, all the pieces obviously create a puzzle. Keel also interviewed everybody. Not just the famous encounters, but the dozens of people who were too scared or embarrassed to contact authorities. And from that, an even stronger pattern began to emerge that both fascinated and disturbed him. The creature seems drawn to certain types of people. Apparently, it's young adults, particularly couples. And the effects extend beyond the primary witnesses. Families of those who've seen the Mothman report persistent nightmares featuring red eyes, electronic equipment that malfunctions without any sort of explanation, telephone calls with nobody on the line, or strange voices speaking like sometimes even speaking in unknown languages, unexplained scratching sounds on roofs and walls at night, pets disappearing or refusing to go outside after dark, kind of like my pets. Where'd my dogs go? I haven't seen them. I don't know where they went. I have no idea where they went. I genuinely don't even know. I haven't seen them in a long time. Linda Scarberry, the most famous witness of this entire Mothman thing, had become a reluctant, accidental celebrity. Reporters camped outside her family's home, and really curious weirdos drove past her house slowly at all hours. Kind of like how people treat the lady who lives in the the Breaking Bad house nowadays. Have you seen her yell at those people? It's weird.
You're a dumb bitch.
All the attention for Linda did come with quite a price. She reported to Keel that she suffered from severe insomnia and recurring nightmares about the red eyes. She also was one to experience the strange phone calls with nobody on the line or mysterious creepy signals. Now, 3 weeks into Keel's investigation, something scary, way scarier than seeing the monster, to be honest. Mary, his investigating partner, mentioned the series of unusual visitors that came in the office in black suits, asking all sorts of detailed questions, new eyebrows, probing, and so on, the Mothman witnesses. They appeared to her and probed multiple times, but the first appearance occurred in late January 1967 while she was working alone. He spoke in halting tones and kept moving closer to her, staring almost hypnotically without ever blinking. No red eyes, though. She explained to John Keel that they look almost normal, but there's something off about them. Their skin's too pale, their movements are too stiff, and that she had seen one pick up a ballpoint pen from her desk and stare at it like he'd never seen one before. To be fair, I do that type of stuff. But the men in black follow a disturbing pattern. They arrive in pairs often, they drive vehicles with license plates that were never issued, their suits are brand new, but completely whack as f***ing out of style. They demonstrate supernatural knowledge of witnesses' private thoughts. They also struggle with basic human activities like wiping before they poop. It just doesn't make sense, Men in Black. You've got to fix that. And they warn people to stop discussing their experiences that they have with them. So if you meet the Men in Black, don't talk about them. One particularly violent incident involves Connie Carpenter, the young woman who saw the Mothman in broad daylight in that field out there. On February 22nd, 1967, she was walking back to school when a black car pulled up beside her. The driver grabbed her arm and tried to force her inside and tore her blouse. Connie broke free and ran home, but the terror didn't stop. It followed. That evening, Connie's family found a note slipped under the front door that said, "Be careful, girl. I can get you yet." Is wrong with the people addressing it. Ease up. Jesus. So we've got the Mothman, we've got the Men in Black, we've got the strange appearances. By spring of 1967, Keel's investigation would take a somehow even stranger turn. When I genuinely mean it. Okay, we've got the Mothman, we've got the Men in Black. How about it? Telepathic. Witnesses began reporting telepathic contact with an entity they claimed to be connected to the Mothman phenomenon. Imagine being an entity and being like, yeah, I'm connected to it, for sure. I'm telepathic, but I'm also connected. Claiming? It's kind of weird. The entity identified itself only as Indrid Cold, the Smiling Man. You've definitely heard of this. It's a fucking creepy-ass West Virginia cryptid. So insane. It's the same being that Woodrow Derenberger claimed to have met on Interstate 77 in a slightly different story. All right, guys, we've talked about it before. And the communications with Indrid come in various forms. There's direct telepathic, contact during meditation or sleep. There's phone calls with robotic voices delivering cryptic messages. There's also automatic writing sessions where witnesses find themselves compelled to write messages that they don't even understand. This is automatic writing, by the way. It seems like bunk, but I don't know. Let's check it out. The contents of the messages sent by Indrid are disturbing. They're profoundly disturbing. They contain specific predictions about future events, sometimes mundane things and other times catastrophic things. Most unsettling are repeated references to a coming disaster, and after this, and throughout 1967, the paranormal activity in and around Point Pleasant reached fever pitch. Keel documented the following: 127 UFO sightings in the immediate area, 47 Mothman encounters, with many involving multiple corroborating witnesses, 23 separate incidents of electronic interference, 18 reports of men in black visitations, 9 documented cases of prophetic dreams or visions among local residents, and 1 case of a brown man flying through the forest cemetery. Alright, that's just such a weird way to describe something. And as autumn of 1967 approached, Keel notices the character of the phenomena changing. The playful, almost curious nature of earlier encounters gives way to something darker and deeper. Witnesses report feeling threatened, watched, and hunted, and the prophetic messages become more urgent and more specific. And finally, on November 19th, 1967, Mary Heyer contacted Keel about a disturbing dream that she had experienced involving Christmas packages floating in the dark water with people drowning. She described the dream or vision as unusually vivid and extremely unsettling, and others reported similar visions, dreams of falling, of metal groaning and snapping, of people screaming as they plunge into icy water. And then we move to December of 1967. Keel reviews 13 months of meticulous documentation, searching for answers that continue to elude him, and the Mothman phenomenon is defying every conventional explanation. It isn't just a case of misidentified wildlife or mass hysteria. There's too many credible witnesses, there's too much physical evidence, there's too many physical effects, too many accurate predictions. Possibly most disturbing to Keel at this point is the realization that all of this supernatural activity seems to be building towards something specific. The entity isn't just observing Point Pleasant, it seems to be preparing the community for something terrible. And on December 14th, 1967, Keel reported receiving what he claimed was the final telepathic communication warning of imminent disaster involving the bridge. Keel spent a sleepless night trying to decode the warning, a bridge in silver falling into water. But what could possibly threaten such a massive structure, and what the does a gray man flying around with red eyes have to do with any of it? At 5:04 p.m. on December 15th, 1967, John Peel got his answer. The Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour, sending 46 people to their deaths in the icy Ohio River, and among the victims are some of the same people who reported Mothman sightings over the previous 13 months. And as rescue boats searched the dark water for survivors, witnesses report seeing a large winged figure circling overhead before disappearing into the winter sky. After this, the Mothman is never seen in Point Pleasant again, except for the statue, of course. So what exactly caused the bridge to fail? IBAR 330 has been waiting to fail apparently for decades. It's a microscopic crack in the heat-treated steel that's invisible to every inspection. Bridges are inspected pretty frequently, and the crack has been growing since 1928. The Silver Bridge uses chains of massive steel IBARs instead of wire cables, which is revolutionary engineering, but with one fatal flaw. Only 2 bars per link, where most bridges use 3 or more. The Silver Bridge uses chains of massive steel I-bars instead of wire cables, which is generally considered revolutionary engineering for that time, but there's a fatal flaw with the Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge uses 2 bars per link, where most bridges use 3 or more. The designers of this bridge believed that their new steel was strong. Obviously, 5 o'clock on a cold December evening, the crack in IBAR 330 reached critical size. The fracture propagated to the steel in milliseconds. First, a brittle break in the lower half of the eye, then a ductile failure in the upper portion. The companion IBAR slid off its pin like a broken link in a chain. The north suspension chain snaps, and then the bridge entirely collapses into the Ohio River. And everything unfolded with a sound that came first. It was a gunshot-like crack that echoed across the river valley. Then the massive steel structure starts to fold, beginning on the Ohio side, where the broken chain can no longer support the load. And in less than 20 seconds, 1,460 feet of suspended roadway collapses into the Ohio River. 32 vehicles plunged 60 feet into icy water. Christmas packages wrapped that morning float alongside overturned cars. And a few people that actually fell into the river from the bridge managed to escape. William Needham is one example of this. He managed to escape his sinking truck cab by breaking the window and swimming to the surface using a floating cardboard box for buoyancy. His partner in the truck, trapped in the sleeper bunk, did not survive. Howard Boggs is another person who survived. He escaped his sinking car but was unable to save his wife Marjorie and their baby daughter, who was trapped inside as the vehicle sank. And in spite of rescue efforts, both of them passed. After the collapse and within minutes, almost every available boat on the Ohio River converged on this site outside of Point Pleasant. Local fishermen, police vessels, Coast Guard, clutters, anyone with a boat who heard the sound of the bridge falling. They pulled 18 survivors from the water, but 46 people are already dead or dying in the December cold and wouldn't make it. The rescue effort continued through the night and into the following days, where divers worked in treacherous conditions, feeling their way through the twisted wreckage on the river bottom. Bodies are recovered one by one, but 2 victims were never actually found, probably swept away by the current or trapped too deeply in the collapse. Now, the bridge is very important to get from Point Pleasant to Ohio and vice versa. There was almost immediately an emergency ferry service that began. using local boats to transport stranded commuters across the river is a massive economic impact to the community. It was immediate and devastating. Commerce ground to a halt. It's hard to even imagine how much this would impact a small community, especially in the 60s in West Virginia. Extremely corrupt President Lyndon B. Johnson ordered a federal investigation within days, and the National Transportation Safety Board began the methodical process of determining what exactly went wrong. Massive cranes pulled wreckage from the river and laid it out in nearby fields, like trying to build pieces of a massive, horrible puzzle. They didn't really talk much about Mothman, to be honest, but what they did discover was sobering. The bridge was designed for Model T Fords, weighing 1,500 pounds. By 1967, the average family car was 4,000 pounds, and truck weight limits have nearly tripled from 20,000 pounds to 60,000 pounds. The bridge was literally being crushed under loads that it was never designed to carry. And the final cause came down to the single eye-bar, number 330 in the northern chain. It was a crack that killed 46 people, and it had been growing for decades, completely invisible to every inspection because it was located on the inside surface of the steel eye. Inaccessible without disassembling the entire joint. Absolutely horrible. Almost nothing anybody could have done about it. It seems like the Mothman thing is like a weird accessory to this. What do they have to do with it? The Mothman, it was a prophecy for the bridge. What? Now, as news of the collapse spread, witnesses began making connections that became strange. The paranormal research community really lost their minds over the whole Mothman thing. Several of the victims had reported Mothman sightings during the previous 13 months. Others had experienced the strange phenomena associated with the creature, electronic interference, unexplained phone calls, Men in Black visits, injured cold. And once again, on the night of the collapse, there were multiple reports of people seeing the Mothman flying around, up to no good. And back to John, who was devastated by the tragedy, obviously, despite his warnings. He began piecing together the connections. The Mothman sightings, the UFO activity, the prophetic dreams, all of it seemed to be building towards this moment, the moment of the bridge collapsing. But was the creature trying to warn the community, or was it somehow connected to the disaster itself? It could have just said, there will be a bridge collapse. It will collapse. A lot of people are going to die. There's a correlation, though. First Mothman encounter was November 15th, 1966. The Silver Bridge collapsed a year and a month later. 13 months. It's pretty precise timing. It feels strange. But also, why would it ever warn people through cryptic visions and terrifying encounters rather than just being like, yo, avoid the bridge at all costs. All right, this bridge right here, yeah, check out I-330, all right? That's not a Model T you're driving. Honk, 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 honk. Just, it would have been better off if it just decked some people instead of just flying around with its red eyes. They'll never understand this cryptic message, or maybe they will. No, seems dumb now. What's the point? Mothman, you freak weirdo. Now, on the bright side, the Silver Bridge disaster did transform American bridge safety forever. The Federal Highway Administration implemented new inspection standards requiring all public bridges to be examined every 2 years, pretty much as a result of that. And research into stress corrosion and fatigue revolutionizes the bridge engineering practice. So that's good. A lot of bridges were collapsing back in the days, and some of them are still collapsing now. A replacement bridge, the Silver Memorial Bridge, opened 2 years later, a mile downstream from the original site. It's more modern in design, built with multiple redundancies, and it serves as both a memorial to those who died and a promise that such a tragedy will never happen again, regardless of the fate of Mothman. So we have a lot of confusion here. John Keel packs his belongings and prepares to leave Point Pleasant. By the way, this is all from his book. You can read his book if you want. What was the point? I don't understand. There's no end. It's just the prophecy of a bridge collapsing, and that's it. John writes that he can't escape that he's witnessed something far beyond ordinary reality. This is not fiction. This is real, too. This all is real. It's documented. So we got Mothman, supernatural, aliens, UFOs, Men in Black, injured cold, telepathic communication, and a bridge collapse. What the I mean, I don't even understand how to even, parse through this information. There's nothing I've learned. I haven't learned any of this. Obviously, a lot of it's true and real because of all the corroboration of witnesses and sort of how it's been treated. But there are skeptics, all right? We're going to talk about some of the more skeptical theories now because that's what I got to do. All right? I can't have, I'm the fun police. Hi, I'm the fun police. But also, that's not that fun. The Mothman could have just been like, yo, stay off the bridge. December 15th, stay off the bridge. Or sorry, he doesn't even do that. He just goes, "Now up the ridge!" Now on to the theories. What exactly happened in this small West Virginia? Decades later, there's still debate amongst researchers as to what really happened here. The theories range from the irrational to the extraordinary, as you can probably imagine. There's a wildlife explanation. A fellow by the name of Dr. Robert L. Smith suggests that witnesses encountered a sandhill crane, which is pretty... large. He said they're large, they have a massive wingspan and reddish eye coloring. They don't have reflective eye shine, and they can't fly 90 miles per hour. And they're not that big. They are a ribeye of the sky, though. Don't tell anybody I said that. Joe Nickel proposed large owls, specifically barred owls with a strong red eye shine. I've seen a barred owl. Never seen one that looked like the Mothman. I've seen an owl, and I'm like, that looks like an owl. But a local resident shot a giant owl with a 5-foot wingspan during the sightings. Apparently, that's also allegedly a true thing. But even the biggest owl is not as big as the Mothman. And then most recently, in 2022, we have the analysis from a man by the name of Daniel Reed. His analysis revealed something interesting, I guess. Within 60 miles of Point Pleasant, there have been 5,576 documented great blue heron sightings compared to only 51 sandhill cranes. Great blue herons, if you don't know, are massive birds up to 4.5 feet tall with 6-foot wingspans, and they are year-round residents who prefer exactly the habitat found in the TNT area, which, in my opinion, is totally bullshit. Alright, that's nonsense. I've seen blue herons, I've seen sandhill cranes. There's no way, unless you are a dumbass, a straight up, just knuckle dragging troglodyte. You would never conflate those two things. Look at that. Nothing is scary about that at all. Now, John Keel, the man who spent the most time there, he rejected simple explanations like the ones proposed by these other science people and proposed the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, which is the idea that interdimensional beings that appear throughout history as angels, demons, or modern cryptids, it all depends on the cultural context. He believes that Point Pleasant became a window area where dimensional barriers temporarily thinned, which is a really interesting, convoluted thing to believe. We do have a unique geology. We're in Appalachia. There's fault lines, groundwater systems, electromagnetic anomalies, the TNT, chemical contamination. Maybe we have optimal conditions for interdimensional phenomena, guys. I don't know. Let's call up David Politis. Let's ask my crazy bitch aunt, Deborah. I don't have any aunts named Deborah. So I just thought I might throw one under the bus there. Honestly, though, this makes more sense than a blue heron. In 1967 alone, over 4,000 UFO sightings were reported across the United States, and there was a particular concentration in Appalachia in this region. It's like a big Mothman thing. It's really interesting. All that being said, though, the bridge still collapsed due to a microscopic crack that had been growing since 1920, decades before any sightings of any of these creatures. That was purely engineering failure, and maybe there was a supernatural prophecy, added to that, but bridges have been collapsing for a really long time, and there's only one Mothman thing, so not totally sure the connection. Now we skip ahead to modern times, and 12,000 people flood the streets of this small Appalachian town almost every year, their eyes bright with excitement and wonder, their eyes red. They've come from all 50 states, dozens of countries, drawn by a creature that supposedly vanished over 50 years ago. It's the annual Mothman Festival, my friends. It transforms this tiny, quiet river community into the cryptozoological capital of America for one magical weekend. Anyways, I have no idea what the happened. Thank you for watching. Go to sour.gg to buy some candy. I have a candy company. We got a new flavor right here. It's called All American. It's apple pie flavored sour licorice strips that we make ourselves in our little factory. Also go to the Gump Club to watch an uncensored version of this video. Thank you, Tara. Thank you guys for watching. And some fun videos I enjoy. Catch you. I know you've probably seen content around the Dyatlov Pass incident on YouTube or on the internet, but I implore you, we've found some different stuff. This is a different type of video. They just fit everywhere. And you're gonna like this one. We bring some alternative ideas to this legendary story. And if you are a fan of mysteries, things that you may not understand, then you will enjoy this video, my friends. We talk about many different mysteries on this channel, but one that I have in store for y'all today is maybe the craziest one yet. Certainly the longest. You're gonna have to strap on. I say that every single time. You're gonna have to strap on for this. Have you ever heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident? If you haven't, then you are in for a treat today, my friend. Speaking of treats, I love candy.
Go to sour.gg.
The Dyatlov Pass incident occurred in the late 1950s and involved a group of young adults going on a long river hike who happened to pass through Dyatlov Pass, where they would always live. The pass, named after the leader of the group of people we were talking about. And to this day, the causes of their deaths are heavily disputed, and there is not one single theory that everyone can agree on, causing there to be numerous theories as to the real cause of their death. Some very bizarre stuff. These theories stem from the outlandish circumstances in which their bodies were found. Some believe that the cause of death could have been an avalanche, but others believe that it was potentially native people that attacked them, or even the KGB were involved somehow. Maybe even a Yeti. The deaths of the 9 students still perplex people to this day, and that is why this story is so polarizing. Our story begins in January of 1959 in the Sverdlovsk Oblast.